Hello and welcome to episode number 321 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's show we learn that the Amazon are leasing some new aircraft as business continues to boom. The first A220 rolls off its dedicated Alabama assembly line, and we learn that Lion Air stops its passenger service just days after restarting them as people fail to follow social distancing rules. Armando talks to Bob Mills about his commercial flying career, and Chris Marsh tells us about his passenger experience flying with La Compagnie.
La Compagnie.
La Compagnie.
Oh, come on, Carlos, you were briefed on this yesterday.
I should have that little, that little Google.
Our producer John is going to feel very smug right now.
Yeah, well. So there he is. It's the man, the one who pushes all the correct buttons and sliders in the P2UK studios. Matt Smith, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, mate. Yeah, it's been, I'll tell you what, I guess we've been so spoilt with such delicious weather to actually have a day like today where, I mean, on the one hand, I haven't got to go and, water the garden, so I'm excited about that. Yeah, as I say, it's the first rubbish day, really, we've had since lockdown, to be fair.
I mean, it's 20 degrees less than it was this time last week.
Pretty much, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't actually have the fan on in the studio for the first time in several weeks.
And also, joining us on this week's show, as always, in his glorious mansion in Buckinghamshire, is, of course, Neville Bounds.
Yes, hello everybody. Hope everybody is well. And yes, you're right about the weather. It has definitely taken a turn for the worst, hasn't it? Not quite what we want. Well, I've been back at work this week, which has been nice. So I've seen 2 customers this week.
Customers? Have you forgotten what they look like?
Yes, I have forgotten what they look like. So that's the first time I've actually been out to see customers since the 18th of March. So it was a bit of a shock to the system, I can tell you.
Yeah,
a bit of a shock to the car. It hasn't driven that far for ages either. So, but in the post arrived this, the BA cold and gold card as well. I can't do anything with it, of course, because I can't fly at the moment. But
no, I know. But every cloud.
Yes, so I'm very, very pleased about that. It's the first time I've ever had a BA gold card, so I'm very, very chuffed.
I can imagine.
Wait, you'll have to get yourself a nice little frame for it now, if being you can't use it. At least you could have it in the house and look at it, and
Well, it's probably going to be the only one you're going to get. At
this rate, I probably won't get one next year. At this rate, definitely not. No.
So what's the next step up from that one, Nev? Is it platinum?
Well, that's it, basically. Or the only other tier sort of status is that you can have a lifetime gold.
Oh, okay.
Which you have to do an awful lot of flying for, and then you keep gold for the rest of your life.
And the gold guest list, which is not lifetime.
And talking about lifetime flying.
I don't.
Joining us.
I don't have it.
Joining us this week is one half of the fantastic Layovers Podcast. It is, of course, the man who would normally be flying around about 6,000 flights a week is, of course, Paul Papadimitriou.
Hello, guys. I'm actually not flying, but I need Nev because I need to have a high test. I'm not in Barnard Castle, so what is this? There you go.
Well,
that's my gold card.
I'm joining you with that item as well.
Yeah,
so
Carlos is sulking now because he has ordered some. It just hasn't arrived yet.
Hasn't arrived yet? I ordered like 48 or something.
I've got a tin. It has got USA West Coast Session IPA on, so it is blue. It's just not quite the same.
Well,
so I was saying gold guest list, which I don't have because I don't fly way enough. BA is above gold, and you get access to like the Concord Lounge at Heathrow T5, which I think is closed. All the lounges are closed, but you get access to that plus a little bit more stuff, and you can get lifetime. I think it's after 10 years of gold, and you can also get lifetime gold guest list. But I don't know how. I mean, you need to be the CEO of.
You've got to own the airline
or something. I don't have any of this. Just
good to see you're representing Japan this week, Paul, with the hat.
Yeah, well, I need to switch hat every time I come on your show. So this time I took the Japanese one. For some reason, I miss. You know what? If there's one travel I'll do this year, which obviously right now I don't know if they're going to do any travel, it would be to Tokyo. So this is my lucky charm, I guess.
Oh. Fingers crossed for you. Fingers crossed, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So a big welcome to everyone who's joined us in the live YouTube chat room this evening. Loads of the famous family members in there, as always. And Chris Marsh is in there actually this week as well. But coming up later.
That's handy. We've got some feedback coming from. It's like he was expecting it.
I know. So hello to everyone who's joined us. Lovely to see you all in there on this Friday evening, the 5th of June. It currently is actually the 5th of June. So we're rattling our way through towards summertime, which if it continues like it is now with the weather, I think we'll have a wet summer.
Be a classic.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. We had the best spring ever for the past 3 months. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, he is right. Yes, but that's what you have to learn about us Brits. If we can at all make it about the weather and make it sound miserable, we will do that. There's no two ways about it.
So you might have noticed Armando is not with us this week. He should hopefully, fingers crossed, be joining us at some point.
No, sadly not. We've had a recent update. He's still driving, bless him. So,
he's still driving.
Yeah, not
flying. That's
absolutely.
He has been flying though. To be fair.
He has.
He might. You never know. He might dip in.
He is appearing on the show though, because we've got part 2 of that fantastic interview we did with Bob Mills. So he'll be very much involved. I'm delighted to say with part 2 of that.
And that is incredible. Listen to. I've watched that. It's very good. So you should all look forward to that coming up later.
Definitely.
But we've got some housework kind of stuff to do before we go on with the first part of the show. So we're going to hand things over to Nev for our special thanks section.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Well, as you know, this is an entirely voluntary project, and so your donations to us are really important and very valuable indeed. So this month they come from Ruben Wells, Andrew Wilson, Megan Carrion, Neil Lanwarn, Stephanie Plummer, Captain Jeff, Stephen Howland, Andrew van der Sarg, Tanya Wyman, Owen, Nico, Liz Piper, Nicholas Hewitt, Jonathan Warner, Philip Labe, Adam Spink, Evan Shue, Jeff Ward, Alan White, Gustav, Jacob Darlington Brown, Masha, Graham Haley, Eric Graves, Matt Caton, Jordan Rose, Myla, Stuart Backer and Ray Williams. Those are the people that donated to us via Patreon, and the people that donated to us via PayPal are Alan Loveday, Richard Adams, Jenny Parkinson, Mazuz Karim and Stephen Eastmead. Thank you one and all for your fantastic donations. We really appreciate them.
We do, especially in these times.
Yep.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, big thanks to everyone. So well done. Give yourselves a pat on the back and a beer. Or a gin.
Gin, definitely gin.
Gin, yeah. I thought that would be your tipple.
Very much so, yeah, absolutely.
But Matt, we've got, I think we've got some listener feedback.
We have, yes, absolutely. You'll forgive me because I'm pressing multiple buttons here, and we know how bad I am at doing that. We've Chris, who is actually in the chat room here, shared with us. It's I suppose it's the nearest we can get to a passenger experience, and he shares with us his experience travelling on La Compagnie.
What great.
The team were chatting back on episode 318 about the idea of taking a SafeJet aircraft to Pittsburgh, say a Gulfstream 550, rather than flying on a commercial 757. And that conversation really struck a chord with me. Flying across the Atlantic in a private jet is something that we might all dream about. But sadly, it's never likely to happen. I did once have a passenger experience which came pretty close though. It was a transatlantic on a 757 with only 15 other people on board, and that included the 2 flight crew and 2 flight attendants. So we would all have fitted quite comfortably onto one of those lovely Gulfstreams. Now, you might be guessing that this had something to do with the current crisis, but you'd be wrong. It happened back in 2015 and was the result of something that caught my eye on an aviation news site. I don't recall exactly where I saw it, but I read an online report about a new route being opened by the French airline La Compagnie. They'd started flying to the US from Paris the year before and planned to start operating several trips a week between Luton in the UK and Newark, New Jersey. What really caught my interest was that they were using a 757 fitted out with just 74 business class seats. The article mentioned some amazing promotional fares for the route, and so, more out of curiosity than anything, I took a look at the airline's website. I was almost put off at first because the offer really did seem too good to be true. There was a special total return fare for couples of just over £1,000. About £500 each was actually less than the economy fare on most other airlines. Trying out some dates, I discovered that there was availability for a 5-day trip which would put us in New York for the 4th of July Independence Day celebrations. That was the decider then. I took the plunge and booked the tickets. I paid by credit card, of course, which gave at least the chance of getting a refund from the card provider if the flight didn't happen for any reason. Now, I've always believed that something which looks too good to be true usually is, and I did have some concerns in the weeks leading up to the trip. Because of only having 2 aircraft that did rotations out of Paris and Luton, occasional unserviceability meant that the flights did not always operate on the days that they should have done. In fact, even when we were sitting in the lounge at Luton, which was included as part of the deal, I could hardly believe that this was really going to happen. But sure enough, an announcement was made that the aircraft was ready for boarding, and we just took a gentle stroll down to the gate. I paused on the way to take a look out at the lovely metallic blue 757. I know that it's a type that Matt has had issues with, to say the least, but putting that aside, I've always thought that this is one of the nicest looking of all the airliners. I've also heard that it's a favourite of pilots too, because of its excellent performance. Talking of pilots, I did spot one of ours leaning out of the side window and wiping the outside of the captain's windscreen. That's something that I've not seen happen before. Walking out across the tarmac always feels so much more exciting than boarding through an enclosed jetway, and this really added to the private jet feeling. It wasn't until we got on board, though, that I discovered quite what an exclusive experience this was going to be. Julie and I were sharing the cabin with just 10 other passengers, all scattered about in the forward section, leaving the rest of the aircraft completely empty. Mind you, I have to say that the flight would still have been good, even if it had been full. As I said, there were only 74 seats, and they were laid out in pairs on each side of the aisle. Modern business class cabins are usually configured in a way that isolates each passenger. Now that's fine if you're on your own, but we found this 2x2 layout was much better for us as a couple. It allowed us to have plenty of space, while still enjoying the trip together. So, sipping champagne, I watched as we pushed back and headed out to the runway past the lines of real executive jets parked on the apron. It was a brisk takeoff and climb, much as I'd expected from a 757, maybe even a bit more so. After all, 12 passengers is a light load by any standards. The seat in front was so far away that I had a whole set of 3 windows to myself, and through them I gazed down at the English countryside as we climbed out through the hot summer's evening. Being something of a petrol head as well as an av geek, I noticed both the circular Myra test track near Nuneaton and the oval Rockingham Speedway as we flew over. I was to get an even more spectacular racing track view on the way back, but I'll tell you about that next time. I'm going to end this part of the story now, as I tuck into my salmon and crab first course, and the aircraft climbs up to cruise level and out across the North Atlantic.
I mean, what a fantastic bit of feedback there. Chris, thank you so very much.
Wow.
Do you know the best thing about that? I didn't have to do a thing to that. It was literally sent to us, ready to go. I love it. I absolutely love
Chris.
it. It's been...
well done.
Yeah.
Oh, but that was really cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, nice job, Chris.
I want to try them. I've never tried them. I really want to try La Compagnie. That looks really nice.
I tell you what,
Nice
the food looks rather nice.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about any food going back after what we're experiencing now. They're all giving stuff into like cardboard boxes or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, we were saying before that they don't fly into the UK. I think we were saying, weren't we?
Nev, I think, doesn't think so.
I don't think they do anymore. No,
Yeah.
I need to double check that. I'm not absolutely sure about that, but I don't think they do anymore.
Wow, that's a shame, really. As you
shame.
say, it sounds like a great airline.
Mm-hmm. It looks like.
Yeah,
It's kind of like having your own business jet as such, but without the lofty price tag.
always a fan of that. Yeah. Oh dear.
So we better move on with some commercial news, guys. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I reckon so.
Yes. So
Let's
we're
do
going to start
it.
the show then, as we do each week, with our rundown of the weekly news from around the world and the UK. So let's go, guys. So this week's first news story is on the website I don't think we've ever used before, but it's quite nice. It's the aircargonews.net website. And this is all about Amazon expanding their fleet with 12 leased freighters from ATSG. So Amazon Air has announced expansion of its freighter fleet as it continues to meet customer requirements for the quick delivery of packages. The e-commerce giant has expanded its cargo capacity by leasing 12 Boeing 767-300 converted cargo aircraft from aviation leasing firm Air Transport Services Group, or ATSG. When delivered, the 12 leased aircraft will join Amazon's existing fleet of 70 aircraft, bringing its total number to 82 aircraft. Amazon said that one of the new aircraft started operations last month, May the 29th, and the remaining 11 will be delivered in 2021. All 12 of the aircraft will be leased to Amazon for 10 years, with options for Amazon to extend the leases for 3 additional years. Rich Corrado, President and Chief Executive of ATSG, explained, said that we are proud to continue to evolve our partnership with Amazon to support the fast, free delivery for which they are famous. Our combined experience in the industry and access of a fleet of 767 cargo aircraft makes us the ideal partner to support the growth of Amazon Air's fleet. Cargo Aircraft Management, or CAM, ATSG's aircraft leasing subsidiary, currently leases 27 767s aircraft to Amazon, including 6 leased during 2019. In December 2018, Amazon committed to lease those 6 plus an additional 4 767s from CAM by the end of 2020. The leasing agreement announced this week increases the projected number of 767s that CAM will have leased to Amazon to 31 by the end of 2020 and 42 by the end of 2021. Amazon is also expanding its operations on the ground with new regional air hubs at Lakeland Linda International Airport in Florida later this summer, and at San Bernardino, there we go, International Airport next year. Additionally, the company is launching new central air hubs at Amazon's Air Hub at Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport in 2021. New hubs will allow Amazon to air commencing gateway operations in May at Austin Bergstrom International Airport in Austin, Texas, and Luis Munoz Marin International Airport in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So it's safe to say that obviously during the lockdown, we've all been spending far too much money with Amazon. So I'd like to say on behalf of me, you're welcome, Amazon. I've helped you to lease these aircraft.
I mean, you must have paid for something, I guess. Personally.
I do. Honestly, I have at least paid for. I'd have to say at least a loading strap.
Right. Okay. Well, it's life goals. That's what I like. That's what I like about you, Carlos. You've always got a life goal.
Actually, just reading, Amazon Air were formed or founded in 2015, operating a fleet of 737-800 BCF, or the Boeing converted freighter, 767-200 BDSF, or BEDEC design special freighter, and the 767-300 BDSF as well. But yeah, great little fleet, and yeah, good on them, I say.
Great little business as well.
Yeah.
yeah. It's a tiny business, isn't it? I don't know how it's taking off, frankly. See what I did there. Yeah, it's. I mean, actually, as I say, through all this awfulness, one of the things in the main that seems to be happening is that it's very much business as usual for the cargo carriers.
It's actually even more than business as usual, because usually they rely a lot of passenger flights to do some of the load for the cargo, and which is why we've seen a lot of the Lufthansa and even BA and others. They've all transformed parts of, one or two or three of their passenger aircrafts into cargo, because like the mail doesn't get delivered otherwise.
No, true, absolutely. Well, and of course, a lot of the airmail is literally stuff that's put in the put in crates, isn't it? Like and taken like in the hold. Stuff you don't realise how much stuff is actually transported by domestic airlines.
So,
Indeed.
Matt, the next story then for you is a bit of a sort of an update, I think, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. You'll have to forgive me because I'm a little less prepared than normal because, as I say, we were expecting Armando. So you'll just have to bear with me as I read this cold. So this could be a disaster. Good luck, everyone. So it's on the Arabian Aerospace website. So it's arabianaerospace.aero. And the story is GCAA investigation into the DA, or the Delta Alpha 62 crash at Dubai. So accident investigators into the crash of a Diamond DA-62 construction calibration services at Dubai International Airport last year remain puzzled by the actions of the captain of the light aircraft as it repeatedly breached minimum separation distances from commercial aircraft before the fatal wake turbulence accident in May of last year. So analysis by the UAE's regulator, the GCAA, showed the flight calibration services DA-62, which had been conducting approaches to runway 30 left, had been 90 seconds behind a Thai Airways International Airbus A350-900 descending to the parallel 30 right. Okay, I'm completely lost by that sentence, but I'm sure somebody will explain it to me in a moment. Vortices from the A3... is it vortexes? I'm thinking... No.
Vortices, yes.
Vortices.
Oh, there's a swell. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Exactly.
Vortices from the A350's left and right wing drifted with a crosswind of around about 4.5... now it says M/S. Is that milliseconds or... meters per second, sorry. John's shouting in my ear, and respectively reached the 30 left approach path after 74 seconds and 87 seconds, the GCAA said. The analysis calculates that the vortices decayed to about 81% of their initial circulation strength at the point they reached the DA-62 at 1,300 feet altitude. And the aircraft lost height, rolled, and then dived steeply into the ground. None of the four on board survived the impact. The preliminary report confirmed that wake vortex was the likely cause of the accident. Now, I'm hoping somebody might be able to give me a bit of a clue about that. So, obviously, the vortices is the swells. So, essentially, it's basically caught in the turbulence. Is that correct? Is that what they're saying?
It's separation.
Separation, exactly.
Separation.
Yeah.
When aircraft take off, Adam Spink would be the ideal person to ask about this. But basically, it's when if you're on a runway, you're going to take off after an A380's just took off in front of you. You're going to leave a certain amount of time. If you've got a 737 taken off in front of you, the time will be a bit less, or a lot less, and so on and so forth. And this is a kind of one of those cases where these guys got caught up in the wing, the actual swirls, if you'd like to call them, or the bad air, if you want to call it even better, of another aircraft that had flown in front of them.
Right. Okay. I mean, this is quite rare, isn't it? And they do. One of the things that's quite interesting from this article is essentially the GCAA sort of literally went, well, we're not really sure why he did that, we're not really sure why the pilot decided to take that course, which it's quite a damning indictment, isn't it, of essentially who's being held responsible here.
But they also talked about that.
Yeah.
UK.
Sorry, we're just getting some words in our ears. Sorry, I'm having a few technical problems here in the studio, so you'll just have to bear with me a bit. So I'm just trying to sort of... So is it the aircraft was going to stop at the Dubai International Airport to calibrate terrestrial navigation systems. What does that mean? Do we know what that is?
It may have been something to do with the airport, the runways, ILS systems, and the actual systems that the navigation systems that the airliners use to sort of lock into when they're on approach to that runway.
Usually, just a mention of having a heavy or a super is the 380. You should have effectively these types of separation between them. Yeah,
right.
The decision of not listening to ATC, I don't know if you guys already spoke about that, you will speak about that, is more likely to be what happened in Pakistan with that horrendous crash well, anyway, I'm not going to comment on this. It's a bit sad, but yeah. So I don't know more because I just read it whilst you were listening to it whilst you were reading it right now, but possibly there's been a mystery. Not this, I don't know. Yeah,
so they were basically saying the causes to the air accident investigation sector of the United Arab Emirates determines that the accident was due to an in-flight loss of control during the approach onto runway 30 left, caused by an encounter with wake vortices.
They were to be. You've got to read the story. They were following the 777.
Right.
Was it an A350?
350, yeah, 350.
Yeah, 350. So super heavy. So the separation, which should have been there, unfortunately wasn't there.
No, indeed. I mean, it's. I don't know if there's much even to be learnt from this, because it's I guess it's just a mistake essentially by the sound of it.
So Nev, moving on with the next story. Nev, you've got a special BA story that's
of course he's got BA.
Not very amusing, I don't think, for someone who's
get a BA story that's not very positive. I don't know.
There aren't very many BA stories full stop at the moment.
No.
Ouch.
Fair point. Well, this is on the simpleflying.com website, and it says that British Airways Boeing 787 on the 4th of June ended up in a sticky situation after it came to rest in the mud. The aircraft was being pushed back in Edmonton, Canada, ahead of a flight back to London Heathrow when the incident occurred. In mid-April, there was a British Airways A380, which crushed a taxiway in Châteauroux as it entered long-term storage. Misunderstanding experienced by a marshaller caused this incident. However, it seems as though bad luck has struck again as another BA aircraft suffered a taxiway mishap. Well, what seems to have happened is that the 3-year-old Boeing 787-9 registered Golf Zulu Bravo Kilo Papa. The 787 departed London from Edmonton on the 2nd of June, and BA's been using this -9 regularly for ferry flights, for freight flights with the lack of passengers at the moment. And around 24 hours in the Canadian city, it was time to return to Heathrow. The aircraft was located on a cargo apron towards the southeast of the airport, according to data from Flight Radar 24. At around 0100 local time in Canada, the aircraft's pushback began. The incident was shared by Airline Kitty on Twitter. However, the process was brought to a halt after just a couple of minutes. It seems that in the darkness, the push operators misjudged the space available to push the aircraft back. As a result, the right main landing gear ended up stuck in the soft ground over the edge. It was not possible to rescue the aircraft during the night, as photos of the incident show the plane still stuck during daylight hours. For reference, sunrise in Edmonton is currently at around 5:10 in the morning, and at the time of writing, the aircraft had been in Edmonton for 33 hours. Well, the aircraft was operating a cargo rotation when the incident occurred, and it's unclear how much cargo, if any, was on board the aircraft at the time. It looks as though the gear had sunk reasonably deeply into the mud just off the taxiway. Hopefully, the ground crew in Edmonton will be able to free the aircraft so that it completes its flights back to Heathrow, which I understand has now now happen, in fact. Simple Flying has contacted BA and Edmonton Airport for comment regarding the incident. BA spokesman told Simple Flying, "We're working closely with the airport ground team to get this cargo flight on its way as quickly as possible." Meanwhile, a spokesman for Edmonton Airport commented the aircraft was delayed due to a technical issue, but it's expected to depart later today. Just a point of order there, I'm all for using the best possible tools to get this aircraft out of the mud. There's a spade, a nice yellow spade on this picture here, which I'm not sure is going to cut it, frankly.
I think it'll make all the difference. I'll be honest.
Could have done better there.
Yeah, absolutely.
These things happen. Of course, once it's in the mud, that's it. It's going to require some serious heavy lifting gear to get it out of there.
Are you talking about BA right there?
Sorry?
Are you talking about BA, the company, when you say they're stuck in the mud?
Ooh, danger. Danger, Will Robinson.
Sorry. I had to. It was so easy.
Well, quite, yes. Actually, to be fair, Nev, they're not the only people who've had a spot of bother recently, are they?
No, that's right, and this is obviously becoming a bit of a habit now, isn't it? But the Copa Airlines had that sinking feeling today. One of its 737s got stuck in the mud, and the Boeing 737-700 was being pushed back at San Jose International Airport in Costa Rica, when a slight deviation from the intended course saw the aircraft landing.
That's a word.
Slight.
Its wheel nuts in the soggy ground. This one happened.
Wow.
In daylight.
Wow.
This 737 was apparently in the process of being pushed back from a maintenance hangar at San Jose.
Now that's deep.
Navigating onto the runway, it had to swing rather wide to avoid colliding with another aircraft which was being stored nearby.
Blimey.
Blimey.
Bit of paperwork to fill out there, lads. And
yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, it could be worse. I think, these will buff out fairly easily, I think.
Oh, yeah, sure.
If anything, they're going to need a good jet wash.
Well, that is true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I see what you did there, Carlos. We're going to ignore you and move on, I think. Yeah.
Anyway,
next,
off with the rubbish puns.
Hang on. Sorry, sorry. I'm just struggling with a thing here. We've got great comment from Tony. I was desperately trying to get it there. It just sums up 2020, basically stuck in the mud.
Stuck in the mud, yeah, true.
I see what he did there.
Absolutely. Very good.
So moving on to the next story. And Paul, this is definitely one for you.
Well, what is for me is that I pledged to avoid putting you in any explicit, so I'm not cursing on the show anymore. But
good luck, everyone.
I'm gonna make our producer John sweat, because the story is U.S. Bans Chinese carriers for mid-June. However, it just changed 45 minutes ago because they're going to reallow them. So I'm going to read the different one. I'm going to explain what happened. So China has had a rule actually, because that's the thing that's changing like an hour ago, has had a rule that's called 5-1 policy. So they allow an airline to one international flight per city per week. And that basically meant that United and others, I think just American and United, were unable to get the authorization to fly as much as they wanted to China. And thus the Trump administration said, okay, screw it. Sorry, guys, you're not being able, as a retaliation, we're not going to allow Chinese airlines to fly to the U.S. And China blinked, basically. That was, I think, a few hours ago. I remember I read something during the day today. And so I'm going to read you another story. And don't worry, John, I'm going to send you the link to that. It's on CNBC. The U.S. scraps plan to ban Chinese airlines after Beijing permits foreign carriers. But they will still, so the U.S. will still limit flights to 2 a week. The Trump administration on Friday, so today, scrapped the plan to ban Chinese passenger airlines from flying to the U.S. after officials there said that foreign airlines can fly to China. The new order, however, limits Chinese carriers to two weekly flights to the U.S., half the number that Chinese officials allow that country's airline to fly to the U.S. The DOT, Department of Transport, said the new measures, which comes amid heightened tensions between the U.S. and China, was needed to restore a competitive balance and fair and equal opportunity amongst U.S. and Chinese air carriers in the scheduled passenger service marketplace. It was not America, it was Delta, United. I think the rest is not very interesting in the article. But so basically, U.S. airlines will have the ability to fly to China, although we know it's a bit restricted these days anyway. And because China is easing that 5-1 rule for the U.S. airlines, for Delta and United, thus the Trump administration said that the plan they had to ban Chinese airlines starting on June 15 is not happening, but they're still going to limit the number. Although that number, I'm not saying it's artificial, but anyway, not a lot of planes are flying anyway. So that number is, there's a little bit of spat, which, by the way, that's a personal comment. That's not in the CNBC article. A personal comment when people say that, December 2020 will be the same as December 2019. No, because we've gotten a lot of kind of spats between countries with this crisis, no matter where it leads to in the end. So there you go. So a bit of peaceful news, actually. No banning, but it's mostly reassuring. I'm glad that they go this way.
So is this just like a sort of like a tit for tat situation then? Is it just like, so one person does a ban, so they're the? I mean, are they retaliating for something?
So the Chinese rule was not only for U.S. airlines. The Chinese rules apply to all the foreign airlines that were trying to go to China. Even Cathay Pacific, so Hong Kong, was limited almost to not being able. I think they're not even able to fly to China. So Cathay Dragon, which is their subsidiary, which they want now to merge with the main Cathay Pacific, is not allowed to fly to mainland China, although these two entities, mainland and Hong Kong, are becoming more blurred by the day. And so this will apply to everyone, but obviously there were, and I don't know the backstories here, there were strong rumors that Chinese made it very much harder for U.S. airlines to land into China, to give them the permission to do so. And in the spat that is happening for a few months, not only a few months, actually a few years, but it's been heightening since the beginning of this year between the U.S. administration and the Chinese government. Obviously, there was a bit of tit for that, obviously. So this is why I'm saying I'm kind of glad that they de-escalated a little bit. Not that this will solve the Chinese-U.S. relations at all, but at least people will be able to fly, because Delta and United are eager to fly there. There is currently, and we've seen that also from London, there is a big demand of people flying to China, way less so flying the other way around, to be honest. They're not coming to London or to the US because obviously they're thinking that we're mismanaging our virus crisis compared to them. But there's a huge demand of going there. Actually, I've read the other day, I've seen prices. You can Google them on Google Flights. If you do a San Francisco, Beijing, in economy, is going to cost you around $12,000. If you do Beijing, San Francisco, so the other way around, is going to cost you $300, which means nobody's flying the other way.
Wow, gosh, that's quite a price difference, isn't it?
Yeah. But also that also means that a lot of people really want to get out.
yeah, true. Well, and let's be, they must be paying it, otherwise that it wouldn't be that price at the end of the day.
Yeah, the planes are full. The planes are full.
Yep. Wow, I mean that's one way of clawing back the money you've lost due to the virus, I suppose. I mean, it's an option, certainly.
Dynamic pricing, Ryanair and EasyJet, they know that. But actually, if everybody wants to fly, why not? Yeah.
Well, that is that is one way of dealing with it. All right, we'll move on to the next story then, and this is a sort of slightly surprising story. So we'll see what everybody makes of this, actually. So it's the Times of India.indiatimes.com is the website, and the headline is "The Pilot Positive. Air India recalls plane to Moscow from midway." So basically in the middle of the flight, and the plane was turned round. So based out of New Delhi, this story, and an Air India aircraft winging its way from Delhi to Moscow with no passengers on board on Saturday morning had to be called back to Delhi over Uzbekistan after the airline realised that one of the pilots on board had tested corona positive. So an oversight by the team checking the pre-flight test reports of crew members had mistakenly read the captain's positive report as negative and released him for the ferry flight, meaning with no passengers, basically meaning it had no passengers and only crew on board, that was going to fly back Indians from Moscow. So the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, the DGCAA, is investigating this case. Prima facie, it appears to be a lapse, said the senior DGCAA GCAA official. In a statement, Al said the Air India Saturday morning recalled its aircraft operating Delhi to Moscow without passengers immediately when it noticed that one of the cockpit crew had tested positive in a pre-flight COVID test. On return immediately after landing, all cockpit and cabin crew have been tested and all laid down medical precautions are being taken to ensure their health and safety. Another aircraft had taken off today to operate the said route, and the Airbus A320neo returned to Delhi around about 12:30 p.m. and now the crew will be quarantined as per the norms. This plane will be fumigated, and the airline is sending another A320neo to Moscow later on Saturday afternoon to fly back Indians from there. The airline sources say that this is a genuine oversight due to the massive amount of test results that need to be gone through. Delhi base alone sees testing of 300 crew members daily, due to which more labs have been roped in. The volume of tests has meant results come in an Excel spreadsheet now. The person checking the test result status of the crew who have tested negative and hence are available for rostering cleared an A320 crew for the Delhi-Moscow flight. As you get the gist there. So, I mean, it's... I guess...
If you were one of the crew members on there, you'd be a bit upset, I'd imagine.
I mean, to be fair, this is so easily done, though, isn't it? Especially if we're talking sort of, 300 tests a day they're talking through that they've got to sift through to sort of qualify. And because the test doesn't come back straight away, does it? So
no.
I was about to say that this is representative of the mess that we're going to live through at least for a few months. I'm not saying forever. Is like all the countries have different rules. Some countries are very strict, others are not, and they have quarantines or not quarantines. What kind of test is it? An antigen test, or showing that you have antibodies that you might have had it, or showing that you currently have it, and then you have the turnaround times of the test. So some it could be 72 hours, and then you also have simply the bureaucracy and the logistics of the Excel file that doesn't open before the flight or whatever. It's just complicated. I think we're all learning that because we're just opening, so we're all learning about how to do that. Greece actually just had Greece is reopening, as you guys know. We'll fully reopen on July 1st, reopening on June 15th for European countries that are below a certain threshold, so that's not the UK. But Qatar, for instance, Doha to Athens is already flying. They had the first flight, I think it was the first, maybe the second, but the first flight that landed from Qatar, from Doha to Athens. They're doing checks on arrival, so tests on arrival on all passengers, rapid testing. 12 passengers tested positive, so Qatar cannot fly to Greece anymore. It's perhaps because in 5 hours, it's 5 hours to fly from Doha to Athens. So did that happen in the flight? Probably not. That would be, but probably, maybe at Doha, they didn't realize it. They just do temperature checks, and maybe the people were coming, I think, from Australia and Pakistan and other places. And this is the struggle we're all going to go through, is how do we, and at some point we'll learn. So that's why I'm not negative and saying it's impossible to travel. But right now, I think we're testing all this. And in that case, I think Air India probably, they're overloaded with a new type of processes that they never had to do. And suddenly one thing slips through the net.
Well, and there's so many things that can go wrong with this, isn't it? And Nev, we're learning so fast, aren't we, with this? I mean, that's the thing. Nobody's really quite sure how this is going to play out.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think the problem is, of course, this varies from one country to the next. You can carry the virus without even knowing it. Whether all those tests are accurate, no one really knows because it's all terribly new. So this is going to be a new way of working for some time yet, no question about it. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens when I get on my first flight, whenever that's going to be, to see how they handle it. I'm sorry, Carlos. Emirates, you remember, guys, they were like, they made this old PR thing. We're going to do a pre-boarding testing in Dubai for people. Well, they abandoned it after like 2 weeks because the results were probably like 30% accurate. So basically, there's no accuracy at all. So they kind of gave up on them. And that, coming to Nev's point, I think there's currently one test done by a pharma company called Roche that is 100%. But I don't know how fast you can, and all this, I don't have any. But you're absolutely right. I think the alignment of countries
will be one of the things that matters the most, which is why I think blocks will happen first. So the EU, Europe in general, will align first among themselves, and probably, like groups of friendly countries and neighboring countries. And then we'll see over time, over 12 months, like an alignment in other countries. Because right now it's not about fly. I'm not afraid personally about the virus itself, probably because, not in a group demographics that could be hit. I mean, I never know, right? You never know. But it's like being suddenly, in the middle of the flight and it turns around, or an airport closed, or, this is still happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're looking to open all the European borders by July the 1st. So I think that's a realistic target date. And as long as they've got things in place to deal with that, I think that's probably doable. But you never know with this virus. And if something gets out of control somewhere and they need to start shutting stuff down, I really hope they don't do it, because we're all a little bit fed up with it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, imagine people that have their lives.
And actually, Mike has got a good point here in the chat room. He's actually saying pretty much along those lines, and he's saying the issue is that there's going to be a second round of the virus. We know that. The question comes: are we going to let it? Are we going to let it go this time, or are we all going to have to lock down and go back into quarantine?
I am personally not certain that we will have a second wavelet or a second peak. A second wave, I'm not sure, because now we've done. Probably, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm not an oracle. I'm not a scientist, but I think we've proven. Remember at the very beginning of the crisis, we're like, okay, the Asian countries have done this, but to the cost of a lot of privacy. You have not mentioning only China, but a lot of countries have, like South Korea, which is a prime example of succeeding in dealing with this. We're using your cell phone data and everything, so in ways that probably in Europe we wouldn't accept. So I think that we've proven. Badly because we're late, and arrogantly because we let people die, and that shouldn't have happened. We've proven that it's possible to flatten that curve and to make it like I think we have 25 cases in London a day, which is for a city of 8, 12 million, I don't know how, depending on how you count, is okay, I guess. I'm not here to being, it's fantastic, they did a great job, but I mean it's I think we've proven we know we are getting a better grip on this. The country is different. The one bit that I'm more interested, because we're talking here about travel, is that the east of Europe has been able to basically crush this very quickly, because they were probably more fearful because they don't have, great healthcare systems. I'm exaggerating here a bit. So they said, okay, one case, we shut down the country. And the west of Europe said, well, it will be fine. Italy, it's Italy. Spain is Spain. And, and just one after the other, like dominoes. And now we're going to see maybe a great equalizer, because east of Europe, and that includes Greece, that includes the south of Europe, suddenly have to open because of tourism, because they need that income. So will they import cases and having an equalized? I don't know. I've read one paper from a very big chain of hotel. They do like very fancy resort, and they send me the health measures. It's 25 pages. I'm not saying I want to be in a hotel where I have 25 pages of measures of health measures, but at least I think countries are trying. We'll see. I think we'll see at the end of the summer.
So, I mean, what do you think about this, Paul? I mean, do you think this whole air bridge idea is sort of like you sort of basically where countries are doing deals with each other to say, look, your caseload is essentially, or your cases are low enough that actually you can you can fly into this here without having to have the quarantine. I mean, is that a solution to this whole 2-week quarantine thing? I mean, is that going to work?
Of course it is. I'm not an oracle. You're just logical. At some point, if you have a low infection rate in your country, you don't want to import cases. I mean, just illogical. There's no need to be a scientist to see that. So green zones versus red zones. And this is how it's playing out pretty much everywhere. So you have like Australia and New Zealand that are saying, okay, we're going to travel between each other because we can have a handle of this. So friendly countries that usually work, which is why I said earlier that Europe will work together because we kind of used to work together, no matter our sometimes disagreements. So we'll find a way. Now, the example to the UK. The UK is, I mean, the west of Europe is late compared to east of Europe, but east of Europe needs the tourism. And the UK is also probably even later. It's very simple. Countries that have locked down or have measures, when I say lockdown, it doesn't mean like, locking everybody inside. I had measures earlier, are just fared better And we were late in the UK, so we're basically paying. That's why the rest of Europe seems to be living in the future. They open restaurants in Denmark and in Switzerland and terraces in France, and we still haven't. But we're 2-3 weeks behind them. Does that mean that the quarantine, probably will get exceptions because the Brits, and I'm not Brit, as you guys know, but I have 3 other passports. We're not that one yet. The Brits are essential to the tourism industry in Europe, especially in Spain, especially in Greece, Cyprus, obviously. So this is why Greece at first said, oh, no Brits are coming this summer. And that was 2 weeks ago. And then they said, okay. Actually, you can come on July 1st and you're just going to test on arrival. And you'll have a little bit of quarantine, which is 7 days in your hotel. I'm going to be cynical, but these quarantines, if they're not policed, who's going to check? Even like the one in the UK, who's going to check that you haven't actually gone out to Tesco?
No, that's true. Actually, while we're talking about quarantine there, I just noticed on the Sky News feeds, actually, while we've been doing this, they're boasting about an exclusive they've got their hands on, which is saying BA owner considers legal action against government quarantine plan and Ryanair vows to support it. So the head of IAG considers a move against the 14-day quarantine on air passengers, and rival Ryanair says it will back him. The chief executive of the British Airways owner IAG says that the company is considering legal action against. Do you know, I hate it when they do this, where they cover the same headline about 15 times before you get into it. Anyway, Willie Walsh was speaking days after the government announced a 14-day quarantine for arriving air passengers, stating starting later this month after another obstacle for the aviation sector battered by the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The IAG chief executive told Sky's Ian King live programme that he is considering a legal challenge against the quarantine and is reviewing the situation with lawyers. He said that the new rules would torpedo the airline's chances of flying in July. We think it's irrational. We think it's disproportionate, and we are giving consideration to a legal challenge to this legislation. I mean, does he have a point?
Look, I think at the end of the day, this, the review of the quarantine starts on Monday, so the June the 8th. The review of the quarantine is every 3 weeks. My forecast is that on July 1st, basically, we're going to open to most of European countries. Portugal is almost guaranteed already without quarantine. And, anyway, the US is still closed because they also don't allow people, especially unless you're a national. So I think this will kind of blow over by itself. It's true that right now the problem is if people want to book a holiday, they have the government telling them you shouldn't travel if it's not essential. So, everything from insurance to compensation, everything kind of goes with it. So people are not really, should I book? Should I not book? I want to, but the government tells me no, and there's a quarantine. But I think they will do it. To be frank, and I know that we are a show, you guys have a show on aviation, and I will go against the flow. It does make some sense to have a quarantine. But let me finish before you will bash on me. It makes sense to have a quarantine because I personally believe, and I said it, I think last time I was with you, that we should have closed. When I say close the airport, it's not close to essential travelers and to cargo and to some exceptions, but we should have closed the airports and the borders in the UK like 3 months ago, like some countries did, and not now. That's okay, fine. But when you have when your infection rate is very few, as I said earlier, you don't want to import others. So a quarantine does make sense. Now, that's how it makes sense with the science. Now, in reality, we need to live and we need to have economies running. So what you find a balance. And the balance is perhaps working with our European friends to make some travel possible and to say, okay, how do we make this possible with our common rules and how we accept each other as tourists and visitors? And nothing. I feel, I'm sorry because I'm ranting a bit here, but I feel at times people and companies want a black and white solution with this virus, when it's over. Like, should I wear a mask or no mask? Oh, masks are useless. Oh, masks are great. No, masks are not useless or they're great. They're like 30%. If everybody wears a mask, the chances of having the virus is less. And the mask itself will not save you, but it makes a little bit much more sense. The same with temperature control. Actually, Heathrow Terminal 2 has just started to have thermal scanners at arrival, and then, they just scan people. The thing is, actually, by doing tests, they realized that 23 or 25%, I don't have the numbers in front of me, 25% of the people not having the coronavirus were displaying some heightened temperature, and 33% of the people with coronavirus were displaying heightened temperature. So basically it's the same. You can catch false positives all the time. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have thermal scanning. He said that all these measures should be layered one upon another, and with that we can find a balance. And I think between masks and reasonable measures between countries, we're open. And I think the quarantine won't hold unless the government goes crazy. I don't think the quarantine won't hold for Europe at least. I don't think so.
So Nev, I mean, what are your feelings on that statement basically that's come out from the manager?
I mean, I agree with Willie Walsh there in that I think the government are very late to the party with this, and I really don't see how it's going to be workable. With this situation, you've got three things involved. You've got the public health, you've got the economy, and you've got the politics. Now, in any normal situation, you would say that the public health is the number one priority and everything else is second or third priority. However, there is a fusion or a blend going on here, as Paul's pointed out, where we have to get the economy and businesses running again. We cannot have a situation where we're into September, for example, and we're in the same situation. That would be absolutely catastrophic, which will take years to recover from. So I think as bad as all this is, the compromise that's being reached is probably about right, especially if we can do it within the European region and come to agreements with other countries.
I fully agree with you. And there will be parts of what happened will be a bit of health theater, because airlines and airports also want to reassure passengers that it's okay to fly. We don't know if it's okay to fly. We can talk about that later. But at least having, I think having like measured measures will allow us to find a balance. We cannot, it's not that we cannot stay inside, we shouldn't stay inside. It's also that, to pay for all this, we need to kind of have the economy kind of running. And it's easy for me to say that because I have a job that I can basically do from home and I'll be fine. But most of the people can't. Yeah. And you need to find a balance between the need of the economy, the need of public health. And this is where, when we were talking earlier about a potential second wave or potential second wavelet, as I called it, maybe I'm wrong again, maybe it's going to be a massive wave. I think, the first time we didn't know what to do. No country didn't know what to do. The first thing was the bluntest of instrument, lockdown, everybody stays home. Hopefully we will have learned now that there are measures that can be applied that can lower the potentiality of the virality of this virus, but also localize flare-outs would be clamped. So maybe I could say, look, I live Southwest London. My area is closed down for a week because my area shows that it requires testing, obviously. But that would make more sense. Or to say, and I know that it's unfair, but to say like a special demographics maybe could be, Switzerland did that at the very early stage. They asked people for over 70 to not go out earlier than others. And I know it's unfair and I'm not over 70, so it's easy to say. But there are ways to find balance between all this. It's not only, lock everybody down at their homes and there's nothing. We can, and I fully agree with Nev. This is why I don't think the quarantine will hold.
No. Well, before we move on very quickly...
sorry.
No, not at all. We've got some comments in the chat room which I'd like to just share with people, if I may. So Tony S. is saying, how can you even get travel insurance if the Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel?
Exactly.
That's a really good point. Good news for Malta, though. Masha is saying that essentially Carlos alone keeps the Malta economy going, so that's good news for everyone. The Airstig's actually saying he's agreeing a lot with, I think, what Willie Walsh is saying that the policy is irrational and disproportionate, but it works to save the health system where there is no other measure that will, which I think is perhaps a point worth noting. Also, Micah is saying, as we saw with security theatre after 9/11, we will now see a lot of health theatre that will affect us for many years to come, which again is a good point. Yeah, okay. Right, Carlos, we need to move on.
Yeah, this next story, Matt, is on the PCGamer.com website. And for those of you who have been either struggling with lockdown or trying to find something to do, one of the things that has become very, very popular over the course of the last few months is gaming online, as in simulator gaming, using the various flight sim programs, one of which being Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is going to be bringing out a new version later on this year. Now, this story is all about the game, and it goes on about, it says here that we know that you can fly to your house, or at least over it, which I've done a few times, and soar through the lovely volumetric clouds. But Microsoft Flight Simulator's latest video digs into how you actually can get to your destination, mostly through a million abbreviations, but also through lots of fetching footage of realistic instruments. When you're making long trips and hitting those high altitudes, you're not going to be flying by looking out of the window, though feel free to soak in the sights. Instead, you'll be using IFR, the real rules and procedures that pilots use to navigate via instruments. ASOBO, or ASOBO, enlisted the aid of NavBlue, a flight operations and air traffic management company, to provide it with a database that gets updated every 28 days, just like the real version, with radio frequencies, approaches, waypoints, and other information that normally goes into planning flights. You'll be able to generate realistic flight plans, but you can edit the waypoints, altitude, and other details create your own custom routes. Once the route is picked, it will show up on your cockpit, so you can always keep an eye on it, and along with your other instruments, ranging from live weather updates to radio communications. The flight plan can also be edited while you're on the move, and you can start your flight already in the sky if you want to get going. There's also a degree of automation too. Depending on the plane, you might be able to use the auto landing feature as well as auto thrust, auto throttle manager for your power, along with autopilot systems. You can also delegate radio comms to your pilot, letting them deal with air traffic control while you just enjoy the flight. You'll need to get in touch with ATC as well if you're playing the game to get clearance for things like changing flight plans and landings. It will also dole out orders and keep you updated. If you want, you can just land without clearance, but that can prevent other aircraft from landing or taking off. It's been a long time since this editor's been in the cockpit of a plane sim, so he confesses he's a bit overwhelmed, but being able to fiddle around with all these instruments and knobs is still a tantalizing prospect. If you've not been able to get into the alpha yet, you'll have more opportunities to get in an early taste in the upcoming closed beta scheduled for mid-July. Now, obviously, this new game, when Microsoft do eventually bring out the release version, is going to be incredibly detailed. I mean, I've seen the videos that the guys here at Microsoft Flight Sim, they do a feature discovery series on YouTube. If you just search in YouTube, feature discovery series, they bring out a regular video with updates on how the game is going. And I've been following those guys on there and watching these clips, and it is safe to say that X-Plane 11, which I personally use here at home, is fantastic. I mean, you guys have seen the videos that I've sent you.
Yes, even though we don't necessarily want to see them, you have shared them.
Exactly.
With us. I mean, it's been lovely.
And the graphics are really good with that, but the amount of texturing and rendering they've put into this game, the new Microsoft, is going to be, it's going to be one hell of a sim to have at home. But that does come not just for the game, but it does come at a price, because as Matt will explain just quickly now, it is quite a hungry game when it comes to graphics processors.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I mean, the actual PC specs itself is a fairly basic one, so it's an i5 processor or equivalent, essentially. So an AMD Ryzen, for example, will also do. But it does need an awful lot of RAM, which I guess you would expect with this, so 16 gigs worth of RAM to do it. Windows 10, but I mean, most people have been forced, whether they want to or not, to have to update to that. But the big killer here, actually, two things, is it takes a 150 gig of disk storage, and
what?
I know it's a ridiculous amount. It's a huge amount of stuff. That's not the end of it either, because actually, when myself and John were looking at this earlier, you also need an insanely beefy internet connection, because that's not the end of the story. It's having to get a lot of data on the from cloud-based systems like on the fly. So, but the big thing actually is the graphics card. You basically, if you haven't got dedicated graphics, so ideally on a desktop or something over a laptop, you are really going to not necessarily get the best experience from it, shall we say. It really, you need dedicated graphics. So unless you've invested in a gaming laptop, which we all know are prohibitively expensive, you really need to be running it on a desktop. So it's I'm sure it will look fantastic, and certainly some of the stills that we've seen from the beta testing is impressive stuff. Good news though, I'm just being told in my ear, apparently there will be an Xbox version, so that may actually be the solution for a lot of people. And of course, most of these controllers and stuff that you've got, like what you've got, Carlos, an Xbox.
Carlos is insane what you've got at home, man. I know. I didn't know. I spotted that on your Facebook the other day. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And
if his wife only knew what it had actually cost. Oh, sorry.
Yes, it is safe to say it's incredible stuff. Honestly, the amount of detail and stuff that the Sims have got now. I mean, X-Plane 11, which I use, like I said, is really detailed. It has hourly updated weather on the when you're flying the Sim, you're flying in essentially with the weather that is in the country you're flying in. It's incredibly detailed, and as I've said to Matt and Nev and the guys and that before, during the course of this lockdown, the kind of sales of Sim control sticks, joysticks, all the different bits and pieces have definitely increased, I would say, on eBay, especially for these. Yeah.
Well, yes, this is true. Actually, the Airstig is saying that while we were all basically, I did an hour on my home simulator last night while you all slept. I'm going to need a lot more practice before I head back to the airport to do it in anger, which is always comforting, isn't it? But there we go. Anyway,
just quickly, Matt, I'll tell you what I would really love. What we had for our 200 show just in my garage.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, you could certainly buy one. I mean, again, I think it would probably cost about the same as your divorce. I think so. So there we are. Yes. And a couple of people saying in the chat room here that, like it says, Stephen Howland is saying, I desperately need it on a PlayStation.
Yes, PS4. Well done, Stephen.
Yes, indeed. But as Tony quite rightly points out, it is actually, unfortunately, a Microsoft exclusive. So
I'm pretty sure it is.
Likely.
Yeah, pretty sure
not
it is.
Likely. Yeah. Anyway, we need to go on. Nev, you are next.
Yes, on the UKAviation.news website. This is a good news story. This is all about the Airbus A220, which is a fine aircraft. And Al and I had the pleasure of doing an interview on one of those at Farnborough last time out. And but this is about the first A220, which has been built at the Mobile, Alabama facility in the US. It's completed its first test flight. First aircraft is destined for Delta Airlines, and it's the first to roll off the brand new assembly line, which was only recently officially opened. Like the A320 assembly lines, parts for the aircraft arrive from various sites around the world, including the UK and China, before being assembled in the Mobile site. Airbus said that the A220-300 took off from Mobile Aeroplex and performed its test sequences before landing back safely at Mobile at 1:44 p.m. local time. As the A220 production line is only recently opened, the first US-built examples of the type have been assembled in an existing final assembly line hangar for US-built A320 family aircraft and its newly constructed support hangars. The A220, if you remember, started life as the Bombardier C series and became a joint project between Bombardier and Airbus, but Airbus took full control of the project in February of this year as Bombardier sought to exit the commercial aircraft market. So that's a good bit of news, isn't it? Some local production of the aircraft in the US. That's great stuff.
Have you guys flown on the 220?
Not yet. I'm looking forward to doing that one day with Swiss or someone like that when I get the chance. Really looking forward to it. It's a lovely aircraft to sit in. It's extremely roomy, I must say. They've done a great job with the cabin, I must say.
Yeah, it's a baby 350 or baby Dreamliner. I've flown it. I'm originally from Geneva, so Switzerland. So I've flown it quite a few times, and it's absolutely brilliant. Though it has teething issues, obviously, because it's it's a very new aircraft. I was in Warsaw last year where we could still fly. I think it was October, and flying Swiss back to Zurich. The battery would run out So they would like, oh, everybody in the aircraft, and then the battery ran out. Everybody out. We need to kind of recharge the battery of the. I'm like, is that a phone or is that an aircraft? And then we did that 3 times.
They're very similar.
And then we missed the runway closure in Zurich and had to spend a night or so. But I mean, honestly, it's a fantastic aircraft, and I think it's one of the aircraft that will be very successful in this crisis. As in, it's a perfect size and very versatile. So it's a fantastic aircraft.
Yeah, they can get into small airports as well, and also the internal cabin bag holders.
Oh yeah, they're huge,
aren't they?
They're huge.
For aircraft of that size.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Al and I commented on, because it means that fewer people are going to be checking in their luggage. Of course, so that means they can hopefully turn the aircraft around.
And piece of trivia, actually, there's 2 versions: the 100 and the 300. The actual base model is 300, so the 100 is a reduced version of it, which means, and Airbus have said so, kind of hinted at it more than said so, there could be a 500 version, which would be very, very close to the 220, obviously, the 320, obviously, but there's a possibility that they go there. It could even go to 700, but I think of course, this is all reshuffling the cards right now, this crisis, but it's a great aircraft.
Yes,
I love it.
Tony S is saying in the chat room here, of course, let's not forget this is a good sales pitch for Airbus, built in America.
Yeah, but I think they open mobile to at first to not have to go through the whole tax war. So basically, the US through Boeing said, okay, if Airbus is taking over Bombardier, and because Bombardier got subsidies from the Canadian government and the Quebec region, whatever, we're going to put like 200% for every aircraft that comes to the Airbus to cover. Said, okay, we're going to build them in the US, so no taxes. So that kind of died down.
Yeah, absolutely. If you did miss Chris Grigg's review, I think it was the A220, wasn't it, that he gave us a review of. That was actually featured in our New Year show, if my memory serves correctly. I can't remember which episode it originally appeared on, but I know I reran it in the New Year episode. Great little thing. I seem to remember that was Swiss. But I'm sure he'll correct me, or John will. So if you'd like to catch a review, you will find it on the New Year show for 2019. No, 2020, because
2020.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, I get very confused. It's like
it's a million years ago.
Oh, I know.
Remember.
Oh, it certainly feels like it, especially with what's been going on this year. But
have some more beer, Matt.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah, that'll help. Yeah, it was just, but if I've got no, I struggle with time zones like you wouldn't believe. So I've got no chance of getting show episodes and years right.
So for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, you may have noticed that Paul is wearing quite a fetching Japan hat. So we're going to go to Japan for the next story, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah, this was not. I had the Japan hat since this afternoon, and then I saw the notes that our beloved producer John, who is actually eating right now, and I hate him because he makes me hungry. And I saw there was a story about Japan. I don't know if any of you knows. Of course you do, because I think I've said it in the past. I used to live in Japan, so obviously that's a very fitting story for this. I had bought it in Don Quixote. For those who know that, they will love it. New Japan LCC Zip Air makes aviation debut with only cargo on first flight. That's a story by japantimes.co.jp, obviously. Low-cost carrier Zip Air Tokyo first flight took off with only cargo on board instead of people due to the dearth in demand caused by the coronavirus pandemic. For the time being, the carrier set up by Japan Airlines will run 4 round-trip flights per week between Narita Airport and Bangkok. It initially planned to start as a passenger service on May 14th. In a rare move, however, JAL, so Japan Airlines, decided to let it transport only cargo after passenger demand evaporated in the wake of international travel restrictions imposed for the pandemic. Zip Air's debut flight Wednesday left Narita carrying machine components and chemical products. The airline doesn't know when passenger flights will begin. And the rest, I think it's not very interesting. I will say, actually, we covered on Layovers. We haven't released any Layovers episode for 2 months, guys. I'm so sorry. But we covered Zip Air. The actual name is Zip Air Tokyo, which is a very bizarre name. Zips through the air. It was announced in 2018 and then was formally announced. So it was the first announcement was to 2018, formally announced in 2019. It was supposed to start flying, I think, to Honolulu first, if I remember correctly. And then obviously this crisis happened. So it's not as if, they started now and oops, there's a crisis. It's a long haul, low cost airline. If you wish, it was a play to have a reduced cost, which is, we never know. We will know at some point what the actual cost will be, because low costs in Japan are always a bit strange, because most of the low costs in Japan do belong to either Japan Airlines or ANA, which obviously they don't want to cut themselves too much. So they do a low cost, but not that low cost that they remove too many of their passengers. So ANA has a majority in a company which I love the name of, which is called Peach. That merged with Vanilla Air, actually. Vanilla Air, another name, was fantastic. Sadly disappeared last year. So that's one. They also have Air Central, and Japan Airlines already has JAL Express, which is low cost for the country, and Jetstar Japan, which is I think JV as well. And Air Asia Japan is also. Does also exist as ANA with Air Asia, and ANA is a majority stakeholder. So you have a lot of these airlines. Of course, it's a bad luck to start an airline in the middle of this crisis. They fly, for those who have ever flown to Narita, which now is losing a bit steam because most people prefer to fly to Haneda. But for me, I have a special love for Narita, because when I used to live in Japan, in Tokyo, that was my airport. They fly out of Terminal 3, which is a low-cost terminal of Narita, which, because they wanted to save money, there's almost no signage, as in, very fancy signage. You have like running tracks on the floor, and the running tracks are by color, like you see on running tracks. And each color leads you, like you go out of the flight, and you have a running track that basically leads you to immigration and then to your bus, for instance. And it's very fun. It's also very modern, because everybody's anyway looking at their phones, so they're looking down anyway. So having a color to follow is easier than looking at something that's on the ceiling. So yeah, I'm very curious to fly one day this airline. If you ever, and that's good, because I'm sorry, I'm always talked about. I love Japan so much. Airlines in Japan flying in Japan is something quite incredible. The low cost I would recommend to fly in Japan, if you ever have the chance to, is called Star Flyer. You're inside and you say, okay, this is how we should do low cost. I mean, my dislike for some of the low cost in this continent. This is truly amazing. But still, good luck to Zip Air Tokyo. I'm really not a fan of that name.
Well, you say low cost, Paul. Do you think that was the case when they designed the livery for their?
Yeah, you're right. Exactly right. It looks like somebody used MS Paint or something. Come on.
That's
Even
I guess as you saying though, it seems like a really odd time to be releasing a new airline. But
you know what? I think
I guess everything's in place before this all started. It's so it would be so much more expensive not to have launched. Perhaps,
there's a similar story in Taiwan. There's a company called Starlux. No, Starlux is a cargo company. I forgot. Or maybe that's Starlux. Anyway, never mind. Cargolux is the cargo. So Starlux. It's Starlux, made by this billionaire, wants to launch it, super fancy, whatever. Corona crisis, and basically they have one flight, and that's also only cargo. So I think it's bad timing, because launching an airline is not just like a whim. These guys had planned to kind of launch it now. They probably have the aircraft on lease, and they're like, okay, so what do we do now? Do we keep losing money? Do we get it back to the lessor, or do we actually do something? And since there's demand for cargo, actually Japan was interesting, because for a while you couldn't send mail out of Japan. They were so concerned about having the virus of cardboard or any of these surfaces, that it was impossible to send any mail out of Japan or to receive mail outside from Japan. So even cargo was for a while. So there's a lot of kind of backed up cargo that needs to go out and in Japan. So I guess they have something. And last word, it's still not possible to fly to the borders are closed, and you cannot. And if you go out, let's say if you were to have to be a foreigner in Japan and you're going out because you need to attend a funeral, you cannot go back.
No. No, and that's one of the hardest things about all this, isn't it? It's like, if you do lose some, I mean, I won't go into too much details, but I've got a family member who's based in Ireland, and she's not well.
I'm sorry.
And weirdly, you sort of reach a point where you accept that that's inevitable. What's going to happen, but the worst thing about it will be not being able, if it happens sort of very soon, not being able to go and pay our final respects is the thing that makes me feel most sad about all of this. That not being able to, because we're just so used to just jumping on a plane because of something. Do you know what I mean? If a friend's not well and you want to catch up with them, you jump on a plane, you go and see them. If family are unwell and you need to go and spend time with them, you just jump on a plane and go and see them, don't you? That's the thing that is so difficult to process at the moment, is the fact that we literally cannot do that, and countries are understandably closing their borders.
Yeah, that's very sad. And even in countries, I mean, I don't know, you must have had, I hope you didn't have any stories close to you, but I had some, not mine. My parents already passed away, but of people here that, because of the regulation, it was super difficult to simply attend a funeral, simply not even having to go to the plane, even taking the car to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Or it's not
difficult. Good. Indeed. Anyway, the next stories are
a joyful story.
Yeah. Thank you. Change the subject. Thank you.
Let's move on. Cough, everyone, and let's move on. So the first one here is with the stories are related. Apparently, I'll work out why in a moment. So anyway, CNN. This is one of what would have been Armando's stories. But anyway, CNN Travel is the website, CNN.com, and the headline is: Airline restarts flights, cancels them again when passengers can't follow COVID-19 regulations. Oh, goody. So the company has announced, so the Lion Air Group, which also includes Batik Air and Wings Air, began slowly reintroducing short-haul flight routes on the 10th of May, but the restored flights didn't last long. So the company has announced that all routes are again suspended as of the 5th of June due to widespread issues with passengers not properly observing coronavirus-related rules related to social distancing and health disclosures. In a press release, a rep for Lion Air explains that many prospective passengers were unable to carry out air travel because they did not complete the required documents and conditions during the coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19 pandemic alert period. The few international flights offered by the airline have been cancelled as well. Under the normal conditions, Lion Air also flies to Saudi Arabia, China, Malaysia and Singapore. The Jakarta-based airline had taken steps to ensure safety on board, such as blocking out middle seats, deep cleaning planes and replacing HEPA filters on aircraft where any passenger had been suspected of the illness. In announcing the decision, Lion Air specifically cited its concern for employees' health, explaining cabin crew at risk of contracting the coronavirus from their travellers. So the Lion Air Group supports government related to the prevention efforts of the COVID-19 spread through active participation in implementing the health protocols that have been established by the Ministry of Transportation, the Ministry of Health and Task Force, the company wrote in a statement released on the 3rd of June. So far, there's no word on when these flights will be rescheduled. Lion Air is offering refunds to passengers who had already booked their tickets, but it's not allowing anyone to make new reservations at this time. And we then turn to a similar problem, because everybody gets Lion Air and Ryanair all mixed up. And it's basically along those lines, essentially. A furious Ryanair passenger, and there is actually a video to go with this, but do you know what? I've actually decided I'm not going to play it because I don't want to give the guy airtime, frankly. Anyway, a furious Ryanair customer has slammed the airline after he was stopped from boarding a flight from Dublin to Gatwick because he wasn't wearing a face mask. So I'm going to name him, though, because he's a muppet. James Higgins was refused entry at the boarding gate as he tried to fly from Ireland to the UK amid the coronavirus pandemic on Wednesday. The Briton said staff insisted he would need to wear a face mask in order to fly. In line line with new rules for Ryanair passengers announced at the airline last month. But Mr. Higgins asserted that if masks were mandatory, they should be provided to passengers in the airport so they don't end up unable to board. He added that the airline had reportedly sent an email about the rules before panning the shot to show another girl who had ended up in the same situation. He added, furthermore, I was threatened that if I did share this video that I would be banned from flying with Ryanair. Well, good luck to him on that one. Sure. Now, whilst I'm not normally one to be supporting Ryanair, as you well know, I'm the first one to sort of say negative things if I can talk about it. I'm actually, and perhaps I apologise if I'm speaking out of turn here, but I am 100% behind them with this one. I mean, if they asked him to wear a face mask and he essentially refused, then I'm sorry, you were quite rightly refused travel.
Yeah, I fully agree with you.
Yes. I'll tell you what. Do you know? I was asked a question earlier today by someone who I was chatting to, and they asked me the question. You know, what really grinds your gears? And do you know what? Stuff like that really grinds my gears. Stuff like that, because it's just like it's just so annoying. It's just like, I'm sorry, the cabin crew, and I know we always stick up for cabin crew because we're lucky enough that a lot of our friends are cabin crew, a lot of our friends are pilots, and you know, sometimes the general public shouldn't be allowed out. You know, you know.
May I ask you a question, guys? We'll all start with traveling at some point. Are you at ease with wearing a mask?
It's a question of having to now. I mean, I was fairly anti it up until a couple of days ago, probably because the science is very mixed on it, but BA is certainly saying at the moment, if you want to get on our aircraft, you'll be wearing a mask. And from June the 15th, certainly in the UK, anyone that's on public transport is going to have to wear a mask, or they will be refused travel. So, so at least you know what the rules of engagement are. I think that is some clarity at least.
And you guys, Carlos, are you okay to wear a mask?
Having a wife that works within the NHS and at one of our biggest hospitals in the region, you know, it's one of those things where I know, you know, I obviously hear things and stuff like that. So the whole thing is, I will wear a mask, we will wear a mask, and it's as simple as that. You know, we'll do everything we can to to protect ourselves.
I fully agree. You know, I don't think it's like I said earlier, and I'm sorry to put the point across again. I think it's people want to. I say people want. It's very condescending. I'm really sorry. People want like a black and white solution. Let's have, again, a vaccine and everything is done. And it's true that the mask is not perfect. I work with IATA, as you guys know, stuff I cannot always say. But so I need to be full disclosure. And masks are not perfect. Yeah, they give a false sense of security, and if you keep touching them with your fingers, it's not perfect. You should remove them with where your ears are and everything. And it's some airlines like Aeroflot and I think Air France are mandated that you have to change them every 3 hours. It's complicated, but at least masks are not like bulletproof, but like part of a layer of. You know, if you're without symptoms, but you're already sick, you're not going to spit it out into someone else, and on the opposite way. And if everybody does that, it already lowers the risk for everyone, and that's a bit of the idea, right? Because honestly, that's my second question. I'm sorry because I'm taking over the show, right? What do you think, guys, about social distancing in place, like the middle seat blocking?
Nev?
Well, of course, the middle seat blocking goes some way towards it, doesn't it? But that's not really 2 meters. So if they're saying that maybe they feel they can reduce it to 1 meter, if people are wearing a mask, face mask or face covering, then that's better than nothing. But of course, if you can imagine, if you're on a 737 or an A320, which is about 180 people typically, and you block off the middle seat, now that's a massive reduction in capacity. So are they going to be running more aircraft, or they're going to see how it goes? There's a lot of logistics, a lot of financial stuff to go with this as well, isn't there? Bearing in mind what
I have this. I mean, it just doesn't make sense for airlines to do it. To be very frank with you, I do not think it's dangerous to fly. I think that the the filtration of the air is good enough, at least in general. It doesn't mean that if someone is next to you and coughs in your face, hence the mask, actually, that could be the problem. But on overall, I think it's okay. And we need to find a balance again. I say I have an issue with trusting the communication right now, because it seems that not only some countries have not really followed the science, whatever the science means. Although I'll give it a break to the science. The science keeps evolving because we're learning new things about that virus we didn't know like 2 months ago. So we also have to kind of evolve. But that there's a lot of lobbying also happening on every side of it. Like the airlines will swear to you that they're cleaner than a operating room in a hospital. And you're like, really? I mean, I've been in lavatories in some airlines. It's not the case, right? So, and again, I'm not afraid of the virus. I'm just saying that I think we need to find some balance, and I think masks and a bit of cleaning and respect from each other will go a long way into making travel possible for a large amount of.
Somebody said on a news broadcast, and I'm not joking, I think it was yesterday on one of the news channels, they said, "Oh yes, the aircraft will be as clean as a baby's bottom."
Oh,
yeah, right.
Okay. They've clearly never spent any time with a baby. Yeah.
But since it's funny, Nev, you mentioned the 1 meter. I believe personally that it will happen. Some countries are already at 1 meter. The UK is still at 6 feet 2 meters. They will reduce it because. And that's a very personal belief. I don't think it makes sense outdoors anyway to have 2 meters, but especially if you're moving. But Alitalia, fable Alitalia, always coming up with new stuff. Alitalia has said, okay, we're going to have a 1 meter social distancing rule within flights. But the meter, they're going from seat to seat, but not from the armrest to the armrest, but for the middle of seat to the middle of seat. So basically economy is fine because they are pretty much at 1 meter. You're like, are you joking? You're just kidding. So really, literally, if you take a tape, it's exactly 1 meter between seat economy and the middle seat next to you, and then the AL seat, and that's the rule. And you're like, so basically, you're not doing social distancing, but you're still trying to tell us that they are doing it, which is.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
There's a couple of comments in the chat room which I'll just whiz through if I may. So Masha, first of all, is saying that surely they have masks for sale at the airport. Surely he can spare a few quid, and I think that's a
in
good
vending
point,
machines.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean,
really?
Not in all airports, unfortunately, but some airports.
Wow.
So we read a story. We ran a story. I think it was last week where they got PPE in vending machines at the airport.
Vegas, Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in Las Vegas. See, Carlos' memory is better than mine.
True.
Jenny in Rome, bless her. Jenny is saying that here in Italy, I never leave the house without one, which I think because obviously they had it quite early on, didn't they? So they're a few weeks further into this, and the whole mask thing, certainly for Jenny, from conversations I've had with her, have very much made it sort of like it's just the new norm, isn't it? And she's saying it's very hot and bothersome, but I don't want to risk it. I don't want to risk otherwise, which is absolutely
great
fair
comment from Micah. Don't miss Micah.
Okay, all right, I'll get there in a minute. Sorry, I'm on a different screen at the moment. But I haven't worn a mask yet, but I don't have a problem with it if I'm asked to. And Mash is saying it's mandatory on public transport here, but I still haven't got used to it yet. There we go. Are we talking seat pitch here? Is that what's exciting?
Yeah,
So seat pitch in economy is a maximum 34 inches. That means to be socially distanced, you need 2 rows empty in front and back. Nev would not know that, as he only flies first class, which obviously is a good point. I think the other point, another great point here that was actually sent to us by Chris Marsh. He was saying banned from flying with Ryanair. Surely that's a prize.
I mean,
scratch card prize.
Oh, a scratch card prize. Absolutely, yeah, indeed. But there we go. Anyway, we should move on to the next story.
Yeah, the next story, Paul. You've got, I think you've got the last story here, which is we're talking about hygiene and being clean.
We're staying on the same topic, actually, which is why I was asking these questions. Is that Turkish Airlines that introduces hygiene experts on flights. And that's on airlinegeeks.com.
Because they haven't got enough to do already.
They're not the only one, but yeah, I'll read it first. And then Turkish Airlines has announced the introduction of hygiene experts to ensure passenger safety in flight. The airline that would normally feature a chef, I've tried it, it's really good. They have a great kebab. For business class passengers on long-haul flights, now has a purview of hygiene expert cabin crews who work as health inspectors, focusing on the enforcement of onboard hygiene and social distancing measures. The enforcement, holy cow. Hygiene experts monitor the usage of masks amongst passengers, ensure that masks are not all removed at once for food and beverage service, and disinfect and prevent queues for lavatories. That must be not a fun job, actually. The Turkish flag carrier has begun to resume its local flights after a 2-month break due to the pandemic, and is just days away from resuming international flights. Alongside the onboard hygiene experts, all passengers are given hygiene kits, which contain a mask, disinfectant, and antiseptic tissue. I don't think that the rest is really significant in this article. Yeah, I've read, actually, they also came up with, if you just Google, guys, they came up with like very fancy graphics about, funny graphics about how this will all play out, and the hygiene kit and what she or he would do in flight. It's not a fun job, because this is why I was asking you about the mask, because there's still a lot of resistance about wearing it, which I understand it's not always great to do that. So I wouldn't want to be that hygiene person that goes and tells Nev to put back his mask because he just had a sip of champagne too much.
Well, to be fair though, you see, but he said that Nev would just do as he's told. He certainly wouldn't be rude to cabin crew about, essentially, I don't know. I mean, perhaps I'm speaking out of turn, but I think we just desperately need the aviation industry to go back to where it was, and if that means that I've got to wear a mask, then I'll do it. Do you know what I mean? There's we need things to get back to normal.
That is what I said earlier. I fully agree. Now, Turkish Airlines also asks, this is not a bash because I think it's a great airline, actually. The new airport is fantastic at Istanbul. They are requesting, or at least asking you, because how can they check, that you wear the mask from the time that you leave your house until you arrive at the terminal, then you're board. And you're like, how are you going to actually make sure that happens? It's meaning there's a little bit in all these measures of health theater again, which I'm fine with. I mean, why is it 100 millimeter liquid for security and not 120 or 80 or whatever? So, but there's a little bit of also wanting to reassure passengers. And I believe, and this is why I asked you guys about the social distancing in flight at the middle seat block. I believe that some airlines put themselves into a corner because at the very beginning, because it was really kind of freaky what's going on, they promised, we're going to have the middle seat blocked, only to retract 2 weeks later. And now people that are still kind of uneasy about flying are like, okay, so what is the truth about the science here? You wanted to do it, but then you don't want to, you just want our money, but you don't care about our health. And it's becoming a difficult PR issue, and I think it will last for a little bit. People were comparing it to 9/11 and this sort of thing. Yeah. It could not be more different, really, because with 9/11, what happened, but there was new security measures put into place to completely secure cockpit doors, lots of other procedures around the airport and security, and it was a sort of a binary situation. Yeah. This is very dynamic, and it's different in different parts of the world with different cultures as well. And so we've had to do a whole load of new learning here, but we have to do it in order to get the aviation industry back to some kind of normality.
And of course, as we alluded to earlier, of course, I mean, things are changing so fast at the moment, aren't they, Nev? I mean, we still don't know what is the correct thing to do, but I guess we've just got to try something, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think this where we are now is that I think the problem is that because it's public health, economy driven and politically driven, as I've said before. Yeah. And it depends on what side of the fence you lie politically sometimes. There's a whole load of stuff that goes on here. And I think until we get some sort of either a vaccine or a way of controlling the virus properly, we're going to be living with this for some time, not just a few months. I think we're going to be into it for possibly into the new year.
I fully agree with you, Nev, here. I think, and I think again, it's you said political reason. There's also there's been a lack of trust in some of the governments and the decisions, but also partially, let's be honest, we didn't know what we were doing. And I say we, not you, me, and all of us here on this podcast. It was hard to know what exactly was the correct response. And this is where I fault a little bit of sometimes the flying public to say, but you said that 3 weeks ago. Yeah, but 3 weeks ago, things have changed. Like it's very dynamic. We're not sure. So we're trying to find some balance into what are the measures that we can live with, masks being one, thermal scanners, as I said earlier in the show, they're not perfect, but all these little layers will allow us to travel. Is it better to actually travel with a little bit more bother or not travel? I'd rather travel with a little bit more bother and accept, and maybe we'll learn down the line, like in 3 years, because we have all the data, that masks were useless or they were absolutely fantastic. And then people will say, oh yeah, you see, I was right, but it doesn't matter, because right now we have to be pragmatic and finding ways that people are reassured, hence a little bit of theater, but also with that we can actually fly. And I'm okay that if we do a little bit of mistakes along the way. And I think it's not too big to ask to wear a mask. I will say last point, I think where it becomes a problem for people to wear the mask, besides who were perhaps have asthma, or because I don't know how it feels to have a mask if you have breathing difficulties already, but people that kept the line since the beginning telling you that this was just the flu will have a problem putting a mask, because it's a sign of admission that they were wrong. So they will say, no, I don't want to put a mask because I don't want to admit it. I was wrong by telling you this is nothing. And then there's 120, there's like 60,000 deaths in the UK and 100,000 more in the US. So
I mean, I'm the first to admit that was very much the sort of the route that I went down, when this all first came out. But I hopefully I'm not a moron, and obviously I'd been educated by people like Dr. Steph, who was saying that actually it's nothing like flu. It may be flu-like symptoms, but they couldn't be more apart in terms of what's been going on. So I think we just got to suck it up and do what leave it to the experts, haven't we? Anyway, we really should move on, because we're trying to be cheerful here, children.
Well, we have got a bit of cheer because
but I think
Armando...
it's cheerful. I think it's cheerful to think that we will travel again because we're doing this.
Yeah, that is true, actually. Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what, Paul? I love the glass half full attitude. I like it. That's the way forward. Anyway, sorry, Collis, who you were saying?
Yes, we have got a bit of joy, because although Armando can't join us on the show this evening because he's busy, obviously flying. Well, he's going to be flying soon, but he has sent us in a little picture which he said that we can pop up on the screen for you guys to see, and it's of him just on his way to his aircraft. There we go. And there he is. And unfortunately, he had to pass this particular. I think that's a 320. I think, is it a 320?
Could well be.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the APU, just seeing if it is a 320. Yeah. No, it's not Boeing. No.
Yeah, I love how you've all gone silent there. Like, I'm going to know the answer to that question.
Well, you should do, Matt.
No.
I need an eyesight test to being able to tell you what it is.
But at least the weather looks a bit better there, because as you probably know if you were watching the show last week, I think it was last week, wasn't it, when Armando had sort of pretty rubbish weather. His end.
Indeed. Actually, and before we move on to the next bit, can I just say, I noticed actually in the chat room that Matt Bunting Frame has popped in there, and apparently it was his birthday a couple of days ago.
Yes,
so I
was.
think belated birthday greetings to Matt Bunting Frame. Happy birthday, my friend.
Happy birthday.
Absolutely.
Happy birthday.
Congratulations. Yeah. Hopefully you got to spend it social distancing with someone. It's never quite the same, is it? It's just like, oh yes, I had a social distancing beer. Do you know what? This is really weird, and perhaps some of this is down to me. One of the things I'm missing most about this is because I'm lucky that I have some amazing friends, and one of the things that I'm missing most about when I catch up with my friends is just a hug. It's the weirdest thing, isn't it? And I'm sure it's the same for grandparents and grandchildren and children and parents and stuff who aren't living in the same house. Do you know that's the one thing that I'm missing the most out of all that is just that sort of it's a manly hug, obviously, but nevertheless it's that's one of the things I'm missing the most. So virtual hugs, Matt Bunting Frame, happy birthday. So we're going to move on to the military in just a moment, but before we do that, we do have a little word from our sponsor.
If you want to take your knowledge to the next level, sign up for a subscription at the A320 Lounge. Our online video courses combine whiteboard-style lessons with full failure demonstrations shot in 4K in state-of-the-art simulators using a professional production team. Go into your next simulator session with confidence, having seen failures run in real time and with the background knowledge to answer any questions from your instructor. To get more information and to sign up, visit a320lounge.com.
With the A320 guys, so we kind of do a bit of...
That's good. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm delighted you weren't listening to that. Obviously, we're back.
Oh, hello.
Sorry.
Fair enough. Sorry, I brought up the faders and they were all talking. I mean, honestly, how
hello.
rude. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yes, sorry about that. All part of the fun, as they say. Actually, we've been corrected by John Jester in the chat room, haven't we?
Well, John would do, wouldn't he? Honestly, John has pointed out that the aircraft behind Armando in that picture is a Boeing 767.
There we are. There we go. That's what I love. That's the great thing about our chat room, and it's live corrections for when we've missed something.
Yeah.
Dear, never mind. All part
actually,
of the fun.
actually, on that note, I think hopefully soon Armando is going to be meeting up with John for a chat, which will be quite good.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, we look forward to that.
Yeah, I can say. Yeah. John, our producer, is panicking. Are you promising things that haven't been
Armando
agreed?
is. Don't panic. But no. So shall we rack out or roll out some grey stuff?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Let's do that. Here we go.
So the first news story on the military segment this week, and it's actually quite good news. One of my favourite grey bits of flighty stuff. This is on the defencenews.com website, and the A400M cleared to drop more paratroopers through its side doors. It's always good if you want to get out in a hurry. So the Airbus A400M transport aircraft has been certified over the past few weeks for two capabilities, simultaneously dispatching 116 paratroopers, that's 58 from each side of the aircraft, and automatic low-level flight. But this does not mean the air forces of the 6 partner nations of the A400M program, that's just Belgium, France, Germany, Spain, Turkey, and the UK, can immediately use these capabilities in operational conditions. There is a difference between certification and operational capability, a press spokesman for the DGA French procurement agency told Defense News. He explained that the French Air Force has declared operational capability for 30 paratroopers to jump from one side door. That means that if the president orders the armed forces to undertake a mission where they would need to have 30 paratroopers jump from the side door, we could do that immediately, he said. Paratroopers can already deploy operationally 2 at a time in free fall from the aircraft's rear ramp. With deployment from the side doors, the parachute opens automatically. The French Air Force expects to be able to use both side doors operationally next year. The certification flight test completed in May this year in coordination with the DGA and supported by the French and Belgian armed forces. A combined paratrooping campaign of more than 1,000 jumps, along with the new methodologies based on recording and 3D modelling of paratrooper jump trajectories. The A400M has also been certified for the first phase of automatic low-level flight capability after a campaign flown down to 500 feet above the Pyrenees and central France. This phase concerns operations with visual flight rules, VFR. In other words, with visibility. The second phase will involve flying with no visibility. Airbus notes in a press statement that this automatic low-level flight, or ALLF, capability is unique for a transport aircraft, even in its inherent for a fighter aircraft. The company says it makes a difference. The aircraft is less detectable in hostile areas and less susceptible to threats when cruising towards key military operations like aerial delivery, air-to-air refueling, logistic, or other specific special operations. Now, the DGA says the new capability takes into account the possibility of failures, such as problems with the engines or loss of lateral and or vertical positioning. The ALLF can also be used either in fully automatic mode or following indications given by the flight director. It will eventually allow the Air Force to fly very low mission altitudes in no visibility conditions, says the DGA. The first new A400M with these two capabilities will be delivered to the French Air Force in early 2021, but an aircraft already in service will be retrofitted with them before the end of this year. Always reminds me of the scene from Mission Impossible where Tom Cruise is hanging off the side of this aircraft.
They were talking about that in the chat room just now. Micah also has a comment to do with that. He says sometimes jumping is the safest way to get out of an Airbus.
I love that one.
She's a bit harsh. But there we go. Yes, happy days. Yeah. Oh dear. Yes, it's. I mean, we saw it at Farnborough, didn't we? Actually, was it the A380 and the A400M that we saw doing a little bit of a dance together in the skies? It was a really fascinating display. Actually, it's a great aircraft.
Yeah, we had a tour around one of these at Riyadh a few years back. Had a tour on the flight deck and everything. It was honestly fantastic aircraft to see inside. Very quite spacious as well. Very spacious indeed. Even the flight deck. The flight deck is huge.
Is it?
Loads of room. Yeah, lots of room.
Some guy called Nev Bounds in the chat room says, "Go big or go home."
True.
But indeed, there we go. Anyway, so Nev, you've drawn the short straw. I'm afraid.
Blah 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 blah.
The next story is with you.
I don't mind.
I'm going to go and have a lie down now. Sorry.
Well, the US Air Force launches contest to replace the B-52 bomber's engine, and GE, Rolls-Royce and Pratt & Whitney will compete for the chance to outfit the B-52 bomber fleet with new engines, with a contract award projected for June of next year. The Air Force released a request for proposals for the B-52 commercial engine replacement program to 3 companies on May the 19th. The engine makers are already under contract to create digital prototypes, and they have until the 22nd of July to submit final proposals. The Air Force operates 76 B-52s, each outfitted with 8 TF-33 engines. The service plans to order 608 new engines, plus spares and support, from the winner of the competition. The public version of the RFP obscures the estimated value of the program, which is projected to extend from 2021 to 2035. Pratt & Whitney, which manufactured the TF-33 currently on board the B-52, has stated it will propose the PW-800. GE Aviation will put forward the CF-34-10 and Passport engines, spokesman David Wilson said. Rolls-Royce intends to offer its F-130 engine, the company confirmed. The Air Force plans to operate the B-52 into the 2050s and sees new commercial engines as a way to reduce fuel burn and the time it takes to maintain the bomber. Last year, the B-52 maintainers at Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana, told Defense News that modern engines would make it easier for crews to diagnose problems and make needed repairs. The Air Force plans to operate the B-52 into the 2050s and sees new commercial engines as a way to reduce fuel burn, which was already in the previous paragraph. But we get the idea, don't we? So that's a pretty big contract by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear they're re-engining the B-52 because
this aircraft will never die.
No,
thing. Not that I want it to die, but I mean it's crazy. Yeah, exactly.
John is just saying in our ear that the first flight was 68 years ago. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's when you look at the pictures of these. If you look online, you can find pictures of the B-52 taking off from runways, and all you can see is these just nice little direct plumes of black smoke coming from behind the air. Obviously, because the engines are quite old now. So with these new engines, at least it may be a little bit more greener. Because bear in mind, the B-52 does have slightly more than 2 engines on.
Slightly more.
In fact, actually, you can't quite see them from the back there. I was going to say you could sort of count them, couldn't you? But yeah, it's I don't know. What am I thinking? Because I don't know. I hear the word B-52 and all I can think of Love Shack. That's my problem. But that's
cocktails.
Quite indeed. Yes. What Nev said. Yeah, quite. Indeed. As you say,
definitely a smoky vehicle.
Yes, indeed. Dare I mention the word chemtrail? No, maybe not.
No, blimey, no.
Danger, Will Robinson, danger.
I would imagine Mr. Warner probably has about 1,000 pictures of one of those.
Yes, in fact, actually, he sent me a picture this evening. He's actually been spotting planes as we speak. I know, just the one, mind.
He found one?
Yeah, he found literally one, and now he's gone to work. So, yeah, there we go. But
can the B-52 go in reverse on the ground? I know the A400M we mentioned can actually go reverse. But that's,
might be a stretch for the 52.
I think so.
I'm
not sure. I know nothing, guys. I know nothing about military aircrafts. I suck. I'm so sorry. I just really asked the question.
That's right. Nev's in that club as well.
Yeah.
So
it would not if it was lightly laden. I would suggest with that amount of power. If it has, I'm assuming it's got reverse thrust capability on the aircraft. Then you never know.
That's your next job, John, our producer, to find a B-52 pilot.
Oh, right, okay.
There you go.
Lovely. Oh, yeah, he'll enjoy that. Micah has been updating. He's saying the B-52 has been in service longer than I have, since 1955. They have talked about re-engineering them for years. Hopefully it will finally happen, he's been saying. Where are we? Let's work out. Sorry, I missed that. John, say that again. Okay. Sorry, I've got problems with my talk back here. Did somebody hear that? I've got some issues here. No. Okay. Good. Lovely.
But no, what's cool is what's happening on the chat when you have who is it, Micah, talking about, since it's been so long in service, would it be cool to find like a grandfather and the father and perhaps the son were all like certified and are flying it? That would be that would be cool. John, this is your next job, to find a trio of pilots that have all flown the same aircraft.
Wow. Okay. Good luck with that. Sounds like a bit of a challenge.
All joking aside, it's testament to the manufacturers of that aircraft, though, that it has lasted this long.
But then again, wouldn't you say, and again, I don't know nothing about military aircraft, but that could be said about many aircraft in the commercial space, just that they need to make money, whereas military aircraft are basically subsidized. I'm not saying it's wrong to subsidize them. I say they don't need to make, commercial sense. Like the 747 or the 757 could, or the MD-80s that were just removed from service could perhaps still fly for a long time, whether or not economical, reality, especially now.
Matt Buntingframe is actually saying in the chat room, no, it can't fly backwards. So that was the answer to that question.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. It's as I say, it's a great aircraft, isn't it? As I say, unfortunately, I still can't. I think of music every time I hear the word B-52. So there we go. That must be far too many years in loud, noisy nightclubs.
Definitely. Yeah.
For me, it's a cocktail. So
right. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Good point. Yes. John Gesture is saying the B-52 does actually use a parachute. So there you go.
Wow.
It's this is why we like our chat room, isn't it? They know far more about this than we do.
I know.
Anyway,
so we have we've got a piece from Armando to play, haven't we, Matt? Which is
indeed.
a second part of his interview with Bob Mills.
Yeah, and in this,
sorry, no, I was actually going to say if you did watch last week's one, this week's one is even better.
Absolutely, yeah. And in this part, Bob is talking about his commercial aviation career.
And you went on after your military career or while you were in the reserves, right? To go on to airline flying, right?
Right. Yeah. It was when I left active duty. It was the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, and there was a huge downturn in the airline industry. So it was tough there were no jobs initially. And then I did get a job at a commuter airline, So I flew for a commuter for 2.5 years. It started going downhill. They were furloughing. I was just about to get dropped off, and I found a corporate job. So I flew King Airs and Citations for several years with a couple of corporations. And the neat thing about that is that it gave me a really wide perspective of some parts of aviation, some segments of aviation that I would not have otherwise seen. There was even a year hiatus into air ambulance flying out of Denver. So I'm flying King Airs in and out of the mountains, bringing back really sick babies, or, really some, taking people that had been spinal injury patients, to their home or to the hospital or things like that, to where it was like, there was a lot of perspective granted in that time frame. So in the end, there was 10-year period where I was doing the corporate and commuter and air ambulance workup to being hired by Southwest Airlines. Can I say Southwest Airlines?
Oh, it's up to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and because, and I was hired at Southwest in 1998, and I will tell you the combination of landing at an airline such as Southwest Airlines and having that, the 7 years of active duty flying and 10 years of kind of hard work flying and making your way back to into the majors during a very competitive period, just gave me so much gratitude for what I have now. 22 years later, and I am at a company that I absolutely love. Everybody thinks we're all corny at Southwest Airlines, but I tell you what, I landed at the place I was born to land at, I think, So
yeah, well, you find very few pilots that are as proud of their organization as Southwest pilots.
It's funny because when I was the skipper of a reserve tactical air control squadron, which was more of an air traffic control and air command and control ground unit, seaborne unit, actually, we would go on the amphibious carriers, and we would manage air combat from there. And my executive officer was a Tomcat backseater who was also one of my roommates on active duty. We'd known each other for years. And one day at drill weekend, I came in and I saw him in his office, and because a good XO always gets there before the skipper, right?
Yeah.
And
his senior enlisted.
That's right. Yeah. The Master Chief was always in there too. And but a good skipper also doesn't come in right on time, because you got to let those guys have a little slack sometimes too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I look into Pat's office and he said, "Hey, Bob, how you doing?" I said, "Great, man. How are you?" He looked at me. He said, "Bob Mills, the only happy airline pilot I know." Now, it's not true, but that's, that's been my life at Southwest Airlines, and really before that too. I've had so much fun doing all these different types of aviation. I'm blessed beyond.
So I want to go back to the air ambulance real quick. Now you said one of the best parts about being a military aviator is the mission. Was that something that you experienced with air ambulance as opposed to corporate flying, where there's a defined mission and almost a time critical need?
It's, I could give you that commitment to mission on each of those jobs, as corny as it might sound, whether it's the commuter airline or Southwest today, because there's people that need to get somewhere a lot of times. Sometimes it's pleasure, sometimes it's business, sometimes it's something not good has happened in the family and they're trying to get there. And we see that a lot. So that airline piece, which you're experiencing as well, it's we're getting people where they need to be. And sometimes it's really critical. I mean, on the commuter airline, there was one time we were stuck in Bakersfield with crummy weather in Los Angeles, of all places, right? We're flying a Jetstream, and there's a guy who's trying to get from Bakersfield to LA so he can get in a car and drive to Santa Barbara for his wedding that day. And he was getting really, really stressed. I was the first officer on that one, but the captain is the guy who was Tina and my best man later on. So we were good friends, and we're talking to the guy, and he's getting pretty tense about the whole thing. We're saying, "Hey man, we're your best hope of getting there, but what were you thinking?" And And so we ended up getting there. We made the mission, calmed down. But, and even more important than that are the families that are going to see someone that's not well, or maybe to go be with a family that for someone who has passed. So there's really, really important, cool mission thing that we do, even in airline flying. It's not just moving ice and coffee from one place to the other, really. It's truly about the people. But if you put that in the context of the air ambulance, absolutely. The King Air ambulance isn't the trauma side of the road pickup transport type thing, but it was, in some cases, it was bringing a very premature child from a small hospital up in the mountains. There was one that's still in my memory, Salida, Colorado, to the Children's Hospital in Denver. And of course, so now you have a tiny, tiny baby, and as it turns out, my firstborn was born at 2 pounds, 12 ounces. So I knew all about this, later. I experienced it, so we have a tiny, tiny baby in an isolette being put on a King Air, and the parents are just, of course, just as worried as any parents could possibly be. And it's our job to take them to a place where they're going to be safe, and the baby's going to get better. Perspective, would be the day that I had my check ride in that organization. So I'm getting a 135 check ride in a King Air, and it's going to be part of a mission. And I'm flying with the chief pilot, who is known to be somewhat tense. Not all chief pilots are like that. My current chief pilot's not. So Bob Picnic, if you see this, I'm not talking about you. A little schmooze because I'm still working, right? This guy ended up being a fine check ride, no problems whatsoever. But the mission was, I kind of touched on it a little bit. The ambulance brought over a 19-year-old kid and his mom. The guy had been in a car accident on I-70 on black ice and no longer had the use of his arms and legs. I mean, and he's been in the hospital for months, and now we're taking him back with a respiratory therapist and a nurse to Enid, Oklahoma, where he's going to, the medical crew is going to meet a local medical crew, and they're going to bring him over and transition him to his home, where they've done, all the disabilities accommodations to the house. And so by the time we got to eat, I got to the airport just nervous, as I always am with check rides. That a little bit of nervousness gives you peak performance, right? But it's just, so I'm butterflies. I'm like, oh man, I got my check ride. I can do it with the chief pilot. Oh man. By the time we got to Enid, Oklahoma, I'm trying to get too emotional on this because it still means a lot for you from back then. The check ride was a side note. It didn't really matter what happened on that check ride. When you see what's going on here, as I help them take a stretcher off with a young man who is paraplegic for the rest of his life, and you say, I think this check ride's going to be okay. So that's the kind of perspective that job gives. And the mission was critical. It usually wasn't time critical, but we were making a difference in people's lives. And we got to know the helicopter crews that did the real trauma stuff, because occasionally you'd meet the trauma team at the airport and do the second phase to the next hospital. And those crews are absolute heroes. Those are the one skid on the side of a mountain picking up a mountain climber who fell horribly, type heroes, just out and out heroes, just like the firefighters, So there's a lot of pretty neat flying jobs out there being done by some really, really heroic, cool people too. So
yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll totally agree with all your sentiments, and it's easy to just get in the front of the airplane, close the door, and forget that everyone in the back has a story as to why they're going from A to B, isn't there?
Yeah, just even now as an airline pilot, right? The best part of my job is it's kind of twofold. One, it's bonding with the crews, which I shared you a good story from this last trip that I won't say here. Armando. And the bonding of the crews and the doing what we do, especially after 9/11 and now with the coronavirus whole thing going on, and how are we getting back towards normal, and how are we supporting each other, and both at 9/11 and now, what kind of fears do the crews have? What are they confronting on a daily basis? What's going on in their family lives? And we spend just a few days together, and really part of my job is to just say, hey, how you doing? And so it's more than a job. It really is. And then the people on it. I have story after story of just a little bit of time spent with a couple people, especially if you've got weather delays or anything else, just going back and interacting a little bit and finding out what people are thinking, what they're doing. Maybe, it's meant a lot. It's pretty cool. Why is it pretty?
And we have a pretty wide audience, from professional pilots to private pilots to aviation enthusiasts, and a lot of airport support workers. And it's important to remember that at the end of the day, we are moving people. I think that's a really good point, Bob.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of heroes, so you've been doing some formation flights recently, right?
Oh yes, yeah. We so the Lightning Formation Air Show. You're talking about the Hearts for Heroes?
Yes, sir.
And for first responders, yeah. It's a neat thing it's actually caught hold across the country among a variety of RV formation groups. It started with a group called the Falcon RV Squadron in the Atlanta area, and they went out and I think they did either 6 or 8. I think they've actually done 12 ship flights where they flew overhead with smoke and then drew a big heart over the hospitals in the Atlanta area, and it got the attention of a lot of people. I mean, the first responders, the medical crews, the people that are just essential employees trying to help life keep going were really touched by it. So that has kind of like sparked little flames of this. I know there's a group called Bulldog Flight in Georgia that's doing it. A group called West Coast Ravens did it in Northern California. Our group, Lightning Formation Air Shows, did it in the Salinas, Monterey, Watsonville area. And then we did it recently in Reno in conjunction with the Reno Airways Association. And air traffic controllers have been super supportive of it. We gave them a flyby down the Reno runway as well. So we, in kind of in concert with the fellas and ladies all around the country that are doing this, did it for a couple of our local areas. And again, the response has been amazing. The Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds and some local Air Guard units with fighters, or the C-130 group here is done at the High Rollers. The RVs are doing the Hearts. The rest are just kind of show of force, and the Blues and the Thunderbirds are, doing their 6 ships with smoke everywhere. And I think what it means to people is that for the first responders and the medical crews and kind of people just doing their jobs every day, it's like we're recognizing it, right? We're saying, hey, we appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it means a lot to us because, the medical crews, I mean, they're taking risks every day, right? And we're getting through this, as a country, as a world, we're getting through this, and we're going to get through this. I mean, I truly believe, we're going to be smart about it, but we're going to get through it, and we're going to get back to living. And so just putting some smoke over the top of the city in heart shapes just shows people some love, just shows people some hope, maybe too, right? So it's a hope flight. It's a Hearts for Heroes flight. It's a first responders flight. It's just a thank you.
I'm loving this series, isn't it? He's such an interesting guy. I could listen to Bob for hours. It's brilliant.
I just love the background.
Yes, it's not a green screen, is it?
Really,
it's
really
nice.
It's an actual one, actually.
It's an actual one.
Fantastic.
We actually had our local one come over 3 days ago. Actually, we've got based near us here, from Old Buckingham. That actually came over a few days back, but great to see it in the air.
Indeed. Actually, Mike has just sent me a message saying that He's saying one other thing you might want to mention, especially since you're doing the military segment, is tomorrow is the 76th anniversary of D-Day, the invasion of Normandy during World War II. It just might be nice to commemorate the anniversary and talk about all those who sacrificed for our freedom, which I think is a great point, isn't it? So, yeah, thanks for bringing that to our attention, Micah. We should have known that already, really, shouldn't we, to be fair? And I dare say, if Armando had have joined us, because he's very good at stuff like that.
He would.
There are no celebration happening in Normandy. I have a friend of mine who has a house right where this happened. The what's it called? The arrival and the landing. And he's actually been isolating there. So he's been living there for the past 3 months. And every year he goes to the celebrations now, so in early June, and I think there's nothing this year, sadly.
No, which you can kind of understand, obviously, because you're in that difficult situation where it will be impossible to sort of, obviously crowds aren't permitted either, are they, at the moment? So it'd just be too risky, wouldn't it? But it's there's always next year. That's what I keep trying to tell myself. There's always next year. Now, true. Paul. So obviously we've sort of been talking about what's been going on here, and I wondered. I mean, what do you think your outlook for the future as far as aviation and everything is all concerned? I mean, have you got any ideas how you think this is all going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, of course I do. I mean, I need to preface that by saying that, of course, I work with some airlines. I do work with OTAs. I work with tourism boards as well as part of my clients. So I have some insights into how they think and how they see things. It doesn't mean that what they think is being implemented or will be implemented. But in a nutshell, I'm more optimistic than I was perhaps a month ago. Not that everything is going to go back. I don't think anything goes back anyway. We evolve, but it's going to be faster than I thought. I mean, again, nobody knows. I've seen earlier we were talking about on the chat. Will there be other waves, wavelets, etc.? All this will of course play out in any kind of projection, which makes it all much harder to forecast. But I'm still more optimistic than I was, not because we have a great handle of things, as in we still don't have any exact solutions in terms of how to take care of people who are having the virus and need to be hospitalized. We're still trial and error, and obviously there's no vaccine. And, although the very optimists tell you, oh yeah, early 2021, I doubt there will be anything in 2021. It will be much later because all the trials take time to make sure that it's safe for humans to take before we can actually inject everybody with that. But saying that, we've done still, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, in the midst of the crisis, everything looked very gloomy. Everything was shutting down. And by the way, I think Carlos said earlier, Paul, I don't know if it was on air or not on air, but Paul, when is the next layovers? And one of the reasons I haven't recorded the next layovers is not because I'm sad and gloomy. It's mostly because first I need to think, but also because everything I said in the last episode 107, which was only me talking for 2 hours, is basically still valid. We're still having a lot of question marks about everything, but I'm more optimistic. I think that we are finding ways to work together, friendly countries, neighboring countries, blocks. So it's here for us, it's Europe and Asian, so the Asian bloc, and of course the North American bloc. There are movements, and people are finding balance. It's hard to say that without sounding a bit. I took it very seriously. I self-isolated very early, like in mid-February. I already, I canceled my flight in early February, and I isolated a month before it was mandatory in the UK. Not because I was fearful of the virus, but I thought, everything, it's kind of logic that when something like that happens, well, countries shut down, airports shut down, countries don't want to import more cases. Everybody looks at each other. Oh my God, you have something and you're coughing, you're guilty. So I'm like, that was kind of logical. The only thing I didn't see, to be very frank with you, I didn't realize how much people would be probably fearful of it. Not saying that we shouldn't be fearful. I'm trying to find a balance in how I say that. It is indeed dangerous. It is not killing everyone at the same time. And I have friends of mine who work in the travel industry. We are in their 20s, living in London, who haven't set foot out for like 2.5 months. I'm like, not even for a run. Like, no, it was too dangerous. I'm like, okay, this is going a bit too much into like the believing this is going to kill you. And I think this is now calming. People are realizing that there are ways to, and we've been talking about this on this podcast, and this is also what I'm hearing from the travel industry, of finding ways to say, okay, between the masks, between some distancing here and there, where it's not possible, having the mask, having other measures, it's possible to have a sense of normalcy. I'm not saying it's going to be normal, but it's still, like I think Nev said it earlier, we need to find a way to go back to doing things. I mean, I'm not saying we should be able to fly as if nothing happened, or to go to the restaurant as if nothing happened. But between that and being on full lockdown, I think there's a balance to be found, and we are slowly finding it. It's still a catastrophe and a disaster that we had to go through, losing that many people and not having a plan. Although we all kind of knew it was coming. All the countries had like pandemic preparations, but it felt like science fiction even for those who were doing these pandemic preparations. And then suddenly it actually happens, and you're like, okay, just let's lock down and let's see what happens next. And I think so. I think we will have some sense of betterment. It's going to be a test this summer. I think, a country like Greece, people see my last name, so they understand that I wasn't born in Greece, but I speak Greek and I have the passport. And I have a place in Athens, and I do work with a tourism board there. So a place like Greece had like very few cases simply because they locked down very early. And now the big question is what's going to happen once they open, because they're going to open to countries with, by definition, had more cases. So it's going to be a big test this summer. But I think in the end, it's going to be more about will people travel than about the cases themselves. Right now, people are still very unsure. I don't know. I could ask you guys, would you go to a restaurant in 3 weeks inside?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of alluded to earlier, I mean, it's one of the things that I'm missing, is because, I'm very lucky. I have some amazing friends, and I very much enjoy spending time with them, and we often go to a pub or we go to a restaurant and all that kind of thing. And I must say, this whole thing does leave me feeling a little bit nervous about the next step. I mean, Nev, obviously, your industry is going through insane changes in regards to how you deal with customers, and obviously, not whining and dining. That sounds terrible, I know, but I mean, obviously, your industry, you are entertaining customers and things like that. I mean, how do you feel about it?
I didn't know that being in the lounge, the first class lounge at T5 was an industry.
Oh, now steady.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so sorry, Nev. I love to kid you. I'm so sorry.
That's all I live for, as you know. No, our industry, the one I work in, is very. We're very social. We like going out together. We like visiting customers. We do events together, all sorts of things like that. And, even actually, I'm working for the European team. So we get together just outside Antwerp, where the European head office is usually. And we all go there for sales meetings and then socialize. And obviously, we've missed this for months now. And I've got to say, it does have some effect. We're all doing, Zoom and Microsoft Teams conversations, and that works to a certain extent, but it's not the same.
No, it's not the same. And it's you like the water cooler effect, just chatting about anything and nothing, and having a beer after work, or just socializing. There's a lot of. This is also, I said it earlier. People like to have black and white opinions about everything. People said, okay, people will not ever go back to the office. People will never fly again, like never travel again. I'm like, no, there's going to be a balance. It's going to be. We're realizing that some stuff can be done online, and some stuff, because also of the economical downturn, will kind of drag, and perhaps there will be less business travel than before, at least for a while. There will be less, maybe people going to offices, or with probably more flexible working hours, or more flexible, I want to do 80% and whatever. So that will happen. But to say that nobody will go to an office is stupid. And it's the same for travel, I think. If people will fly, and Nev, would you fly next month easily without thinking twice?
I mean, we're allowed to travel within country at the moment. So we're allowed to travel anywhere within the United Kingdom. And possibly Northern Ireland, actually, but we're not allowed to travel to the Republic of Ireland, and we're not allowed to travel internationally.
What you're saying here is actually the key for the people I work with or consult for. That's the biggest worry. It's less about, so tourism is one thing. People want to travel. If you let the Brits, and include myself in there, although I don't have the passport, if you let us travel this summer, everybody will go. Yeah. Not everybody. There will be like a part of the population that is wary. They will wait 4 more weeks, a month or two before trying to go, but people want to go. Business travel is a problem because corporates have a duty of care to their employees, and they don't want to be the first one to be sending their employees in case there's an actual problem happening. So they like, well, we'll have these policies of non-travel, non-essential travel that will drag on perhaps a little bit.
I think my company has been absolutely superb. I can't criticize them at all. They've acted out of an abundance of caution, and the top priority is employee safety. Everything else is secondary, and I'm very impressed.
Nev, on that note, Nev, obviously with the company you work for, you do a lot of European travel, or you travel within Europe and stuff. Hence the gold card. Do you, but since this whole thing has started, and more and more people who work from home, like yourselves and Paul, have been using Zoom and other platforms to communicate with either customers or colleagues. Do you think that'll be that when the restrictions are finally completely relaxed and normal flying and aviation resumes? Do you think that companies will stick with the Zoom kind of thing rather than send like you across? I
think there might be a bit of that, but really you can't beat the face-to-face conversation. And I know a couple of people in the legal profession that back in the day would take a business class flight to Geneva to see their clients for a 1-hour meeting, take them out for a nice meal in the evening, and fly back the next day. That probably, although useful, it probably means that they'll be doing less of that kind of thing possibly.
And it's also first, it's true, I know a lot of bankers and they like to do that, and it's also an employee benefit. That's what as companies, to say, hey, we know it's not purely essential, but I mean, if you want to go to Amsterdam and meet this client and come back, or go to this trade show and come back, we know it's not like 100% essential we're there, but I mean, it's part of what you give to employees as, it's not a gift, but as part of what makes a company work. So I think it's just going to be a bit slow, but I'm more optimistic I'm not saying it's going to go back to normal again. I said it earlier in the show, nothing goes back.
Yeah.
Because we evolve, we're going to have new measures and et cetera, and the world has changed, and probably the world will be slightly less globalized. We mentioned in the show, thanks to our producer, John, hi John, the China story. This is something that was already happening before. I mean, the tension between the US and China, but now it's going into even more stringent measures against each other, which means overall the picture of very easy travel across the globe, which was at least the purview of people like us having the right passport to do so a British passport, a German passport, a Swiss passport, might be more complicated for a while. It doesn't mean that we cannot do it, but it might be more complicated. The big question mark, to be honest, for me, is the pricing of travel. How much flights will cost 6 to 12 months down the line? Because revenue management has been thrown down in the toilet because there's no way of forecasting, because now there's no historical basis to do so with reduced fleet and etc. So we've seen that airlines like Ryanair have literally crushed their prices to the lowest possible because they want people to fly, but that's for the next 2 months. What will happen afterwards is really hard to say. Will we have to pay 30% more to fly to Tokyo since they have the hat today? I have no idea, and that will be very interesting. I hope not, to be honest with you, but that's a possibility.
I mean, Nev, do you think that might be eventually what's perhaps makes it prohibitively an issue? Is that the prices are so much higher that actually companies are thinking, nah, it's not really worth spending that.
No, I think that when you have a big moment like this, it's very easy to scrap all of the rules of engagement, as Paul was just saying, and going, well, actually, no, we don't need to fly anymore. We don't need to do this. We need to work at home more. And there may be a bit of that. But really, I think let's face it, the revenue generation and the job security that the travel business offers in the leisure world and in the business world is absolutely enormous. I forget what the figures are, but it's just in the UK, it's a huge number. And I think that if we start saying, well, we're not doing this anymore, we're not doing that, I mean, there might be a case for a reduction of those London to Manchester flights, for example, those sort of things, maybe train more, maybe Zoom, that kind of stuff. But I think for the normal business relies heavily on the face-to-face conversation, which and augments with Teams and Zoom calls, basically.
Yeah.
I'll give you two things on that were very interesting. First one, you just mentioned train Manchester-London. Actually, the French, as part of the bailout to Air France, Air France KLM is a group, but KLM is doing their own bailout, and Air France is pretty stupid. But anyway, as part of the bailout, they've said there's a mandate for Air France to reduce the number of domestic flights out of environmental, so green reasons. Thus, Air France will start having passengers going with TGV, so the high-speed train for destinations like Marseille, etc. So that's a mandate from the government to reduce carbon emissions, to be a greener airline, because they got, I think it was 7 billion euros or something. And that's something that we're seeing repeated in other countries as well. So there's no bailout as such in the UK. But for sure, especially since BA is trying to reduce its cost base, let's put it that way, we might see a bit of less domestic travel in the UK made by plane, which sucks for other reasons. It's longer to take the train, but it's greener to probably take the train as well. So that's an interesting thing that will happen with business travel. But again, I fully agree with you, Nev. There's not going to be like a shutdown of travel and people are going to do only Zoom, and this won't happen. Now there's going to be an adaptation for sure for a while. But less so because of the virus, more so because of the economical crisis. Because when you have less budget, well, I'm not talking about your company, Nev, or anyone's company here, but when you have less budget, you suddenly, send less people for travel because travel is a bit expensive.
Agreed.
I'm optimistic-ish.
Okay, well that's a good place to end it, I think. So Paul is optimistic-ish. Carlos, perhaps we could just whiz through the old social medias before we wrap up
the show. And quick run through with the hosts then for your week ahead. Let's start with you, Paul, because you're our guest. What's on the plans for Paul this week?
I should go back to doing the Layovers podcast. I mentioned episode 107, which I know you wanted, Carlos. It's been like almost 2 months I haven't recorded. I will.
You realise you've actually been on our show more than you have do your own podcast.
Exactly. I'm living vicariously through your show. It's
always welcome, my friend. Always welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate, by the way, that you invite me, because I know that I can be talking too much from time to time. But I will do that. That's on the pure aviation one. I still work. I had a lot of work, so I will continue having actually a lot of work. But yes, we have a lot of fans of Layovers. I wasn't really looking at the stats, and although I haven't released in 2 months, in the aviation, rankings around the world, Layovers is number one in countries like Hong Kong, is number one in Singapore, is number one, and I'm like, how is it still number one when we're not releasing anything? So I need to get on to release something. And I will say that when I record this, I will tell people to listen to PT UK, because you guys are doing a much better job. You have a producer. You're fancier than I will ever be able to. So
well, no, we don't.
Otherwise, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, I can say it's just because we need a producer, because otherwise we're rubbish. That's what it's.
You're not, guy. For the rest, I hope to be traveling. That would be my question to you. When do you think is going to be your next actual international, so plane travel? For me, I hope to be in August, just a short trip to Geneva. That's it.
Nev, what's going on in the world of Nev?
Well, I'm working next week, and hopefully to try and see some customers if they are working. That's the other thing. So I can travel within country, so we'll see how that goes. But it's not a very busy schedule for next week at the moment, so I'll have to see how we get on. But I shall be around, definitely.
Well, any flying in the schedule? Have you got anything lined up?
No. Funny enough, I see one of my customers up in Newcastle, and I very often think I might just fly up there instead of drive. But looking at the BA schedule just to fly to Newcastle, there's nothing doing until July at the moment. Yeah. And they were previously running 4 flights a day. So, complete change. Wow. So there'll be another month, I think, before we do any international travel, that's for sure.
Matt, what about you? What's going on in the world of Matt over this next week?
Well, as I sort of alluded to last week, there's a little bit of studio work here that I need to do that will otherwise sort of eat into my very hectic schedule of sitting. So, yes, it's it's not really a lot, not really very little going on in the world of Matt. It has to be said.
Next week, I'm back trucking next week, which is quite nice. Yeah. We've got a little bit of work.
That's why you want the Layovers podcast. So, you want to be listening when you're driving.
I need the show. Actually, Paul, it is honestly. I do listen to the show when I'm driving.
I know. When you're driving, you kept asking me in the past. So okay, I'll do something about it.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. But especially for Carlos,
yes,
especially for Carlos.
So I've got 3 days at work.
Oh, exciting!
Nice, good. Yeah. So yeah.
All right, social medias then, please, Carlos, and then we better go.
Social medias, the social media links. You can find us, obviously, on planetalkinguk.com, on the website, www.planetalkinguk.com. The links are all on there. If you want to grab yourself a T-shirt, you can grab yourself a P2UK T-shirt. You can also find the links to Patreon and our PayPal links. And also, don't forget as well, the Amazon shopping link, which, again, I use quite a fair amount, hence the reason I've just brought at least 12 new aircraft. You can also find us single-handedly. Don't forget as well that very important WhatsApp number. If you guys and girls want to send us a picture to put on that screen behind Matt in the studio, you can send your pictures or audio feedback and video feedback to our WhatsApp number. That's +44 757 2249 We would love to hear from you. Obviously, we've had some really great feedback come in into the show from Chris, and if you want to send us something, we would really appreciate that as well.
And Carlos, can you repeat the name of the company that is behind Matt?
Oh, La Compagnie.
That's a little better.
It's better. Yes. It's better.
Yeah, do you know all I heard in my ear? Whether that was our producer just going,
So, I could say it in the Suffolk lingo. So La Compagnie. There we go, boys.
Right, that's lovely. Yeah, thanks for that.
La Compagnie.
La Compagnie. So
I will just say very quickly. Actually, we've got a part 2 of Chris Marsh's feedback. That's to look forward to next week. So part 2 of Chris Marsh's great feedback will be appearing next week.
So massive fingers crossed that we'll have Armando back next week on the show, because we've missed you this week, Armando.
Yeah, I missed you, man. Yes, I missed you, Armando.
So join us again next week for episode, and that's the point actually. Don't forget, Paul, you need to plug your
I said it. Yeah, okay. Layovers.2, that's on the web, and if you want to find it on your podcast app and listen to the back catalog, because I haven't released in 2 months, it's just search for Layovers and every single potential possible podcast apps. But again, Layovers.2, and you'll have all the links, including Twitter. We're very active on Twitter. That's where you can find us. Actually, me, because I'm the one actually putting the updates and answering. But if you want, you can find me there. So,
but do give our regards to Alex as well.
Yes, he gives as well. Sorry, I should have said that at the very top of the show. He gives his regards as well. He's still busy being a teacher, a father. He's a teacher, a father, a cook, and basically a better man that I will ever be.
So that is where we're going to bring episode number 321 to a close. Big thanks to all the chat room, all the YouTube chat room, and all the audio downloaders of the show. Big thanks to everyone and to all the hosts. So from me, Carlos, here in my bedroom studio, and from Matt in the PTUK studios, from Nev over in the Nev Tech studios, and to our brilliant guest, Paul, over in his studios. Have a great weekend. Take care. Stay safe. And see you all next week.
Everyone say bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.